You're watching Cable 2.
Good evening. I'm Shay Woodbury, Chair of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education, and welcome to the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education Special Call Meeting, October the 1st, 2020. I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting officially to order. Dr. Harrison, could you, we'll, I guess, call a quorum do you want to call the quorum, I guess, online first, and then we'll...
Sure. I'll just go straight there.
Okay.
All right. Chair Woodbury.
Present.
Lyda Calvert-Hayes.
Present.
Andrea Bramer.
Present.
Barbara Burke. Did you check and see if Ms. Burke can hear us? Ms. Burke?
Present.
Very good. Thank you. Leah Crowley.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Leah Crowley.
Present.
Dana Jones.
Present.
Deanna Kaplan.
Present.
Elizabeth Motzinger.
Present.
And Marilyn Parker.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get to the next agenda item, I just wanted to make this disclaimer as the chair that all of the members of this board, including Dr. Harrison, who serves as officially the secretary of the board, have worked and been specifically engaged in this process to meet the expectations of tonight's meeting to determine how we will reopen schools, if at all. A couple of the acts that we've all been engaged in. For one, there was a COVID committee that was chaired by Board Member Parker and included Board Member Bramer, Jones, Motzinger, Kaplan, of course, Dr. Harrison and her staff, and many of the board members participated on a regular basis. We had a plethora of community organization conversations. I know Board Member Burke and Board Member Jones specifically talking to folk out in our community around returning to school, if at all, safely. We all have definitely met with the superintendent over and over and over and over again as board members to get to this place tonight. Some of us have been engaged on statewide task force. I know that Board Member Jones is on one of the state task force. I sit on a urban task force with all of the larger school board members across the state. I know Board Member Bramer is consistently engaged in academic research around this issue. We have read hundreds of emails and replied to just as many. Some of us even have direct experiences. Board Member Motzinger teaches at the North Carolina School of the Arts, where she served as their health director and come in direct contact with students all across really the country in working to serve students. Of course, I work at North Carolina A&T State University and teach beyond the glass, as I like to call it, and understand how stressful this moment is. Of course, the superintendent participates in the North Carolina Superintendent's weekly meetings. From my understanding, they're starting at 7 a.m. and can go, as long as needed. Some of our board members have even visited other districts. Board Member Kaplan and Crowley have visited neighboring districts to see what it looks like if we were to reopen. I know that some of the staff have contacted the North Carolina Virtual Public School to look at that state model. And I think that many of us have actually tuned in to several of the other school board meetings to consider how do you reopen, if at all, safely. Tonight, the board welcomes strong inquiry. We welcome respectful dialogue. We welcome strategic debate and empathy for all, as suggested by Mr. Josh Ziesel last board meeting, because we all realize that there are various opinions on how or if Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools should open. Lastly, please know that by authority given to the chair of the board, I manage board meetings in order to adhere to North Carolina law to conduct our business meetings. Hence, I plan to be very considerate and patient in order to help us conduct an effective meeting. Please know that we may have to take a 5-minute recess in order to reset and progress, and that's okay. We are here tonight because I believe we all want our students to have access to the best education and our educators to have the best place to work in a very safe way. So with that being said, I say thank you, and I appreciate your attendance tonight and patience as we get through this process. Now we will go to the next agenda item, which is public comments on the agenda items. I will say tonight that each person will have 1 minute to try to accommodate time. I think that Brent Campbell may have talked to you all about tonight is 1 minute instead of 3 minutes to address, of course, only myself as the chair. We ask that you not talk, of course, about any personnel or student issues. We ask that you are kind and respectful to the process. And so with that being said, I will call up the first person on the agenda for tonight. And let me just say, we have speakers coming in also virtually. So this is why we're doing, 1 minute is more than what you see here tonight. We actually have some public comments coming in virtually. And so as soon as we attend to the in-person, then we will get to those online. So first we will have Mr. Alan Daniel, and I think there is a green X to stand. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
In the upcoming presentation, slide number 42 says that Guilford County will return 10/20. That is disingenuous. Their policy states on their website, GCS plan to reopen schools depends on whether public health indicators regarding community spread are trending in the right direction. The school board approved metrics at Thursday's meeting that were developed in partnership with the Guilford County Health Department. That fact has been made clear to the board and Dr. Harrison many times. The metrics that Mr. Swift is going to present in a little bit are far different than the Harvard metrics that I've been sending you all. They're far higher. Today we had 85 new cases. Even by those higher metrics, we are not safe to return to school because 14 days we got to stay under 50. So as of today, the clock starts over. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Mr. Mark Wilson.
Thank you. I'd like to implore the board to urge you to start Plan B immediately. Also have Plan A on the way. Parents got whipsawed in June when the board decided to go to virtual, when initially it was telegraphing that we were going to have Plan B. Students in other schools that are open are far ahead of our schools that are not. Our grandson, K1, New Hanover schools, all open. Sight Country Day, Summit, Calvary, Mount Airy City, all open, no issues. New Hanover, all open, doing well. We need to get this going. You cannot come back from the baseline. Our young kids are below the baseline and they can't get back up to here. So we've got a bad situation with our young kids. We've got to get them going now. I think having a 3-week delay to have the young kids going back is too long. I will do everything we can. I'll be volunteering my services to the board and have anybody available that can help me get this going. Taxpayers provide the funding for you all. You provide education as an end result, and we appreciate your help, but we definitely want to get back to Plan B. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Frankie Petri.
Can I pass my time over to one of my other people? Is that allowed?
Yes,
Okay.
as long as they know it's 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay, it's 1 minute. What do I think it's supposed to be 1 minute?
Mm-hmm.
Members of the board, I spoke last week about EC kids and how they need to be back in school. I think you all saw the video that we sent you representing the kids from our district. They're dying slowly in front of us, and I can't keep watching this. After 8 months, we've seen them decline, and they need to be around their peers. They need to be in a setting where they can have friends and they can see other people, because depression is setting in, and it's not just for the kids, it's for the parents too. They're depressed because we have to watch this. So I say that to say, I hope that you will consider Plan A, Plan B, but we really want Plan A. We want them to be back. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Val Young.
Good evening to all. I would like to first say that I applaud everybody for all that they've done during this pandemic. We haven't lived through this before, and it's really, really hard for everybody, our parents, our children, our students. But as FCAE already stated, whatever we do, we want to do safely. So we did a survey, and it's kind of, when I did it, I wanted to focus on the concerns of people. And lots of concerns that people had were equity when it came to transportation, making a mistake and going too fast back in and traumatizing our children even more. And that's what we don't want to do. We want to make sure we have the proper PPEs for everyone in all schools, and we want it to be equitable in all schools. And we also want to make sure that everybody that's fragile has those options that they need to do their job. So we have children that are fragile, we have staff members that are fragile, who are taking care of elderly parents, and we want all those things to be considered. So as we're at C, we want to know that when we move to B, that we've done it safely.
Thank you. Next, we have Laney, ruses. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name, and Stacy Kazakos. Laney Rusis or Stacy Kazakos. Okay, we'll go to the next, Greg Frick. Greg Frick. Okay, we'll go to the next, Sarah Furlbacker.
I am speaking to you today with concerns for my 3 children in your school district who need to return to school. All 3 are in very different circumstances that I'd like to share and only talk about my 5th grader who has an IEP. She suffers from a TBI and has lots of short-term memory issues. She has an auditory processing disorder. Jumping from Zoom to Zoom is very difficult for her, and all her EC teachers do not use the same platform. So I have a child at home that is struggling to keep up with what is going on, to keep up from jumping from class to class and trying to remember the steps. I asked the district today to take these EC students into consideration. I feel that this is being failed upon them. I don't feel that the district is working for them, and I'm tired of seeing my daughter cry and struggle during school at home. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jesse Brixius. Jesse Brixius. All right. Next, we have Elena Flincham. Okay.
I'm here to show a student's perspective of remote learning. We need to go back to school to get good grades. I'm a 3rd grader and I don't want to get behind. It feels like I spend more of the day being upset than actually learning. So please send us back to school.
Thank you, Elena. You're a very brave young girl. Next, we have Annette Boyd. Good evening.
I just want to ask you guys as elected officials to our school system to please bring back the kids to school. Because I have a son who is first grade. He is under IEP program and he is struggling. Every time the teacher speaks, if he's behind on writing, because he's behind, he cries and he screams like a bloody murderer. And I don't like seeing him like that. Instead of learning, he's not learning anything. He needs to mingle with his classmates at school. And I called everybody except the school board about the health. You guys should have planned about the kids that's under IEP program to bring them back. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jimmy Boyd.
Jimmy Boyd. Come on now, Jimmy. I hope you're going to be smart.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Boyd, before you start, I want you to back up off of the podium just for safety reasons. They'll clean it afterwards, but they're asking me to make sure the presenters know to not touch the, So I'm just following their orders for safety reasons.
Sure.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Board, you should have received an email from me earlier today. I hope everyone had a chance to read it. If you haven't, I have copies of it. We'll be more than happy to present it to you. Also sent one to Miss Jenkins and several other people. My wife just spoke. She let you know what she goes through. Luckily, we're one of the families that was allowed one of us to go home and work from home. I work for a law firm, so I don't have that option. She does. She sacrifices with our child with an IEP and sits there all day long trying to help him get through this process, and it's a never-ending story. It does not work. Being out of school does not work. One thing that you have failed to realize is where you are so in-depth on helping us with a physical attribute to this disease that's come through, you failed to look at the mental side of it, what it does to the kids and to the families. It's created hardship in our family, a higher stress level, and now some legal actions that I'm having to deal with in a different manner. What we need to do is we need to, as elected officials, do our jobs. You're to represent the words of the people. You're not designed to create policy. You're to go along with what we want. Our kids need to be in school for health reasons, for their social reasons, and to get the education that they so rightly deserve and what we pay for in this community. That's what a lot of us are asking for today.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd.
Excuse me?
I said, thank you, Mr. Boyd. Your 1 minute was up. You can wrap up this sentence, though. Go ahead.
Thank you. What I'm asking today is that you listen not only to what the so-called scientists say and the way things are going in our communities, but listen to the people that has to live with these issues on a day-to-day basis want from you, our elected representatives.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Mr. Al Jabbar.
Hello, I can't hear who the name was.
Mr. Al Jabbar.
Good evening.
Good evening.
No one wants our children back in school worse than I do. When you go into communities such as Rolling Hills, as I do, almost daily, and I see families not even wearing masks, it concerns me of what the health issues are going to be when these kids come back into the school. And I think the community's main concern here is health for our children and our staff. We have the ability, and hopefully Mr. Swift will have something about some ways and means of getting some testing done in our community, because we certainly need it. And lastly, I pray that no child, we lose not one child, because we got to rush back into this process, because I wonder which one of you will be willing to go to that family and say, we made a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jabbar. Next, and we have Rhonda Mays.
Good evening.
Good evening.
No matter what side of the issue you're on. I believe we all want to make certain that our students and the staff are safe when we return. I have 4 questions, well, 3 questions, I combined 2 of them. Do we know how many students are going to be returning for face-to-face instruction? How many staff members are going to be returning? And how long do we, and how much PPE, disinfectant, masks, and other items that we need in order to continue to disinfect and keep our buildings and each other safe? How long will the supply we have last? You know, and even with the soap as well. And how do we make certain that every student who needs transportation has it and that it doesn't depend on the family situation? Thank you.
Thank you. We will now transition to our online virtual callers, and the first person on the list is Mr. Tripp Jeffries.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. Tripp Jeffries, I have recently heard online so many vile, vitriolic comments made about teachers, you'd think people were rehearsing for a presidential debate. Let me dispel a myth. We all want to go back, but we want to do it safely. We need to ignore hysteria, politics, bullying, or threats of litigation, and embrace science, logistics, and sound pedagogy in that order. 2 weeks ago, I overheard 2 unmasked parents in public talking about how if children die of COVID, it would be God's will. I was mortified. We can't move into the middle of I-40 and then say if we get hit by a Mack truck, it must be God's will. God wants us to be safe and gives us the free will to choose that path or not. And if we choose tonight to send thousands here into the jaws of this deadly virus, I think you will all regret it long past the next election. Please make a wise decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Betsy Hankes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right, so I want to say good afternoon, Dr. Hairston, Chair Woodbury, and members of the school board. As a teacher and parent for Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, I want to preface my comments with the statement that I am not against reopening schools. I am, however, against reopening schools without a clear plan and safety metrics put in place. In education and in life, the famous saying, failing to plan is planning to fail, rings true for us all. And I have to say I'm concerned because I feel our plan is incomplete. Most importantly, the safety metrics need to be spelled out explicitly in our plan. Secondly, the plan is not developmentally appropriate for our youngest learners up to even our oldest. Children should not be coming to school only to sit by themselves in one spot all day long staring at a computer screen. That is no better than what they're doing now, and in fact, it's worse. Plan B does not allow for socialization or play or even singing, and I sing in my first grade classroom every day. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Jenny Easter.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start off by saying, for a district that prides itself on teaching our students growth mindset, I feel like some of our leaders, parents, and teachers are giving up on the belief that basic abilities can be developed and improved through dedication and hard work, even if that means virtually. Do you know why teachers are encouraged to build relationships with their students? It's because when we connect and instill a positive outlook on education, it impacts how they develop a mindset. And because new things are hard, if they persevere, they will still grow. Mindset comes from teachers and the adults in their lives. If you're in the mindset virtual is a failure, guess what? You aren't going to motivate your child's mindset to log into live sessions, listen, participate, and push through new challenging concepts we have to teach them. We have to own the fact that we are not going to have a normal year whatsoever, so stop trying. Our focus should be to provide as much of a stable learning environment as possible, which is what we've worked on the last 7 weeks. Please let us continue that stability and make it better to reach those who are struggling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Stephanie Morris.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I don't think we should be opening yet. We're starting to see a rise again in cases in many states across the country. And until we have a treatment, it's inevitable that it's going to keep spreading. Excuse me. Example, Rockingham County Schools, which is much smaller than us, has only been back to school for a week, and 3 middle schools have had to close. Sorry, I'm breaking up a little bit. I just don't think we're ready. I don't think we have all the safety measures in place, and I think we just really need to think this through and wait until next semester and see if we have a vaccine or a treatment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Pamela Moore.
Hi, my name's Pam Moore. I'm an EC teacher at Southeast Middle School in Kernersville, and I'm ABD in the program at Gardner-Webb University. Honorable board members, I have concerns about COVID cluster occurrences as we begin to consider the transition from virtual to face-to-face instructional facilitation. Many colleges across North Carolina have moved their instruction from the hybrid model to virtual instructions. Many have sent students home from their on-campus housing due to the number of clusters that are increasing rapidly. I have concerns that these clusters will occur and rapidly spread throughout the Winston-Salem-Forsyth County School District, impacting students, families, and the community. I implore you to continue virtual instruction in our district until COVID cases are reduced to a sustainable level in our community.
Thank you. Next, we have Nicole Romano. Nicole Romano. Next, we have Tiffany Pratt. Tiffany Pratt. Next, we have Tiffany Kratzer. Tiffany Kratzer. Next, we have Sarah Jacobson.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sarah Jacobson, and I'm a ninth here in the district. Today, I would like to voice my concerns about returning to school. I'm in favor of returning to school, but I'm very worried about safety. What policies in place for students and staff to wear masks at all times during school? Everyone needs to have a very clear understanding of what exactly happens when someone is not wearing their mask. My main problem with Plan B is that high schoolers won't even go back until the second semester, which is very problematic for honor students like myself, who will miss out entirely on some of their advanced courses. For example, by the time we return to in-person learning, my biology and history classes will be finished. This is an even bigger problem for people taking APs who will lose so much instructional time for these college credit courses. Finally, I would like to address the issue of how classes will operate under Plan B. It's come to my attention that at least on the middle school level, students of completely different classes may have to stay in the same room all day. What happens when one student is trying to learn a language such as Spanish, while another student is in the same room playing the saxophone for band class? This will just cause further disruption for the students' learning experiences. In conclusion, I do support the effort to go back, but not with Plan B. We cannot go back to Plan A yet, but Plan B is not the solution. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Joseph Lee. Joseph Lee. Next, we have Courtney McQueen. Courtney McQueen. Next, we have Peter Antonazzi. Dr. Peter.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. I reviewed the PowerPoint that will be presented later, where several challenges to reopening are presented. However, no plans to address these challenges have been proposed. Case in point, there are 6 slides on busing issues. To achieve social distancing guidelines, the transportation audit concluded an additional 252 buses would be required. So my question is, what is the plan? Will social distancing guidelines be relaxed? Will buses be purchased? Or will busing no longer be available to choice in magnet schools? What is the plan? Second, the new director of school nursing has not begun that position yet. I expect the board would want to hear the new director's need assessment before voting on a plan. Third, facility audit is incomplete. I would expect that the board would want to hear the feasibility of the classroom social distancing plan before casting a vote. Fourth and finally, what are the metrics agreed upon to safely reopen under Plan B? What are the metrics to advance to Plan A and revert back to Plan C? The data Mr. Swift will present is mixed, with one CDC criteria in the higher risk category and another at low to moderate risk. What is the plan? In conclusion, my recommendation to the board is to request an actionable reopening plan to vote on. Challenges are not a plan, solutions are.
Thank you. Molly Muse. Molly Muse. Michelle Jordan.
I'm here. Molly Muse is here.
Molly.
Can you hear me? This is Molly Muse.
Okay, yes. Sorry.
So there's a long list of questions that really need definite and transparent answers before we can safely return to school. Will there be transparent reporting of positive cases, and how can the community members stay informed about that? Will there be transparent metrics about to determine if it's safe to reopen? What protections will be in place for staff who report safety violations to HR? What happens after the?
Can I hear you on TV?
Excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What happens after the CARES extended leave expires in December? How will contact tracing be handled in high school? Will all of the teachers' classes have to return to virtual learning for 14 days if the teacher has to quarantine? How will students be screened before entering the building every day? And how will we screen that the correct students are getting on the bus each day? What protocols for students who refuse to wear a mask or wear it correctly, as many people in this meeting have not done, or follow safety procedures? Why was a new survey never sent out? Our situations have changed since June. And finally, my biggest concerns are about instruction. A hybrid schedule is going to be far more disruptive than daily virtual learning, whereas daily virtual learning gives students a routine to rely on and builds momentum. How are teachers expected to manage a virtual class and an in-person class at the same time? I promise you that is impossible. How are students at home going to get the same attention as those in the classroom? How can a teacher help a child from 6 feet away? And how are children going to
Thank you, Ms. Muse. We're going to have to go to the next person.
They can't be near each other.
Thank you. Next we have Michelle Jordan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the question that I've been asked as a teacher over and over again is if I want to go back, and the answer is yes. But the answer is also safely. And looking at Plan B or any reopening plan that's been presented in our district, we can see that there's lots of unanswered questions with logistics that just show that it's not safe for our students or our staff right now. And so then the question is, why are we pushing to go back? And the answer to that is because everyone wants normalcy. But everyone needs to understand that under any reopening plan version of B or A, it's still not going to be normal. It's not going to look like it did before we went back in March. And so what we need to be focusing on instead of being normal is how we can teach ourselves and our students to be resilient and how to be patient and how to mourn the things that we have to persevere through and how we're going to come out on the other side of this stronger together. But rushing back under Plan B right now with things not safe for everyone is not the answer.
Thank you.
So please think of that as you vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Catherine Fanler.
I'm really inspired to hear all of the teachers stepping up, because my point tonight is that although it's your intention to make the best decision you can, and we're going to have to use science and solid metrics, you don't have all the information you need for a decision of such unprecedented seriousness and incredible complexity. You are missing the critical perspectives of the experts in this setting, the teachers and the staff, the boots on the ground who would be responsible for implementing this plan on a daily basis. The plan Superintendent Hairston will present tonight was only just made public. Board members received it around 2:30 p.m. today. Public input and consideration specific to this plan is far too limited. Do you not think that a matter of this weight and import deserves our most careful, most thoughtful consideration? And do you not think that you need the expertise and the perspectives of the teachers, the staff in the schools, who work directly with students every day in order to decide whether this is a truly workable plan. Every school is different. Every age group of child is different. It all presents unique challenges, and unless you consider the perspectives of the teachers and staff, you are playing a deadly game of chicken with the lives of children, families, and teachers, and all members of this community.
Thank you, Ms. Fanler.
Please delay the vote tonight. Please agree to wait.
Next, we have Jacob Cook. Thank you, Ms. Fansler. Mr. Jacob Cook. Lily Lopez.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm Jacob Cook.
Oh, okay, sorry. Mr. Cook.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, I would like to start off by thanking WSSBS for giving me the opportunity to talk tonight. Me and my parents are just very concerned for my sister to go back and all the school kids because one is wearing the mask for the certain length of hours that they're going to have to, and also if they was to decide to go back to school, there could be a rise in cases, and the plan B, it just seems like it's not a very good option right now. So I think we need to wait with flu season coming up as well, and it's better safe to keep doing what they're doing now. And I think everything that y'all do.
Thank you, Mr.
And we know that God's got this. Thank y'all.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished before your time. Next, we have Lily Lopez. Is Lily Lopez on the line? Lily Lopez. Okay. Bishop Todd Fulton. Bishop Todd
yes. Fulton here. I'm representing the Ministers' Conference of Winston-Salem and vicinity. I'm the Social Justice Chair. The conference is the voice for the voiceless in our community. We're also the conscience for our elected officials and our community. Micah 6:8 says, what does the Lord require of us? That is to act justly, love mercy, and to walk humble with God. When you look at what's going on with the transportation, bringing kids back, the kids who are going to suffer the most will be African American kids, black and brown, poor, white kids. I want you to consider that when you think of bringing these kids back. We need to show mercy towards them. We need to act justly. Teachers are underpaid, overworked. The medical staff are getting hazardous duty pay. You're going to bring these teachers back, put them in a hazardous duty situation, and they're already undercompensated. Let's consider not only our students, but our teachers as well. God bless you all, and thanks for the work that everyone's doing.
Thank you. Next, we have Pastor Timberlake Covington.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Harrison and Forsyth County School Board of Education for the opportunity to speak. The Ministers' Conference of Winston-Salem and vicinity continues to stay connected with the community. And although there has been a lot of great feedback about the efforts put in place by the school district regarding safety measures and taking to heart a robust transition to Plan B, the concern is still that even without students in school and teachers not being required to be in buildings, the district still finds itself with a large number of staff that has had to quarantine themselves due to exposure or to testing positive. I understand that the Board of Education is voting on a staggered reopening. Still, another point to consider is that other districts had to shut down even with a staggered approach because exposure is genuinely hurting and affecting the attendance and disrupting our students' learning. We want what's best for our kids, and we need to consider their safety first and to focus around the inequities faced by a majority of our Black and brown communities, by our low-income families, and by our most vulnerable student population in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Katie Sonnen Lee.
Hello,
Hello. Good evening, board members and Superintendent Harrison. As some speakers have mentioned tonight, including the ones right before me, we know that the last 7 months have been extremely difficult for Black students, Latino students, exceptional children, and English language learners. Whatever the board decides tonight, I want to really emphasize that we have to keep Black and Brown and other vulnerable students at the center of every decision that we make. Regardless of whether we have Plan B or Plan C, we need to keep all the current support like food and meals, care teams, Wi-Fi buses, hotspot technology, and provide more support as needed, like after-school care for working families and child care for working families. Whatever happens tonight with your vote, whether students are in person, sure we have options that will serve all kids, but especially those who need the most support. I was glad to see the option to remain at students' current school but stay remote was added to the Plan B proposal. That option is important so that families can have the least amount of disruption to education but the most options to access their education. We need to be sure we have options available that work for all of our students, even those who may need extra support and particularly those who may need extra support. If Plan B isn't working if Plan C doesn't work for certain students, like we know it's been exceptionally hard on exceptional children, then we need to figure something out for them.
Thank you. Next we have Marilyn Jensen Guthold.
Yes, hello, thank you.
Yes.
So I have 2 children in the school system, and we have participated in a number of school pickups and drop-offs. And most of the staff manning those pickups and drop-offs were masked, but some were not. I saw some staff who were standing shoulder to shoulder unmasked. I saw one staff member stick their head into a child's car. I saw one staff member join a group of 2 families and stand in the midst of them, everybody unmasked. So I wonder if not all the staff follow the CDC's guidelines scrupulously, how will they ensure that the children do? How will you ensure during bathroom breaks that the children remain masked and socially distanced, that they wash their hands? Will you only allow one child at a time to visit the bathroom? How will you handle school bus rides? All the children have to enter and exit the bus through the same narrow door, walk down the same narrow aisle. How are you going to make sure they remain masked? The bus driver has to watch the road and drive. How about lunchtime when they have to remove their masks to eat? I understand the virus has upended everything, and it's challenging to help the children with their schooling from home while also juggling work. But that is infinitely preferable to contracting the virus and maybe dying. Right now, public health has to be the paramount concern. Maybe the world's children fall behind a year in school, but is it preferable that they lose a parent or that someone in their family sustains permanent organ damage? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Last we have Dana DeHart.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, school board members, Dr. Harrison, parents, and fellow teachers and staff members. I wanted to share with you today some of my experiences since we have returned to school under Plan C that have led me to request that the school board please let us return safely to school under Plan B. I'm a 25-year teacher, and I teach at a Title I school that primarily serves at-risk students. Just today, I had a student that I was trying to help remotely. He couldn't share his screen with me so I could help him more effectively because he said his school issued device logged him out of Microsoft Teams every time he tried to share his screen. I was trying to just talk to him through how to do the assignment, and he kept being interrupted by someone. I could hear another teacher in the background on a computer, so I asked him if he was at home or in a child care group setting, and he said he was at home. I asked him who he was talking to. He said his younger sibling. I asked if he was having to help his younger sibling with his schoolwork, and he said yes. I thanked him for being such a good brother and told him I would wait. I was eventually able to help him get to his work after about 3 or 4 more interruptions with trying to help his siblings. And about a week or 2 into school, I even heard a story of students who needed to access Wi-Fi, and they even had a bus outside of their apartment, and a CARES team member went to help, but they were not able to access the Wi-Fi because they had to come out their apartment and sit on the grass. What are they going to do when it gets cold and rainy outside?
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is discussion items. First, we will hear from Joshua Swift, Health Director of Forsyth County Health Department with a Forsyth COVID-19 data review.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good evening, board members. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you. Just to let you know, I have with me virtually Glenda Dancy, Assistant Health Director, Dr. Chris Ohl, Medical Director, and Dr. Lavette Miller, our epidemiologist. So I will go to the first slide. So what I'm going to share with you, these first two slides, are the current CDC core indicators for safer school opening and operations during COVID-19. I'll share with you on the left the two core indicators and the 5 key strategies, and then you'll see on the right over the next two slides the 5 degrees of risk of transmission in the schools. You can see the two core indicators are the number of new cases per 100,000 persons within the last 14 days, otherwise known as the incidence rate, and the percentage of lab tests that are positive during the last 14 days, or the percent positive. Then you'll see the 5 key strategies are the ability of the school to implement 5 key mitigation strategies, which include consistent and correct use of masks, and this is in the classroom, but also on the school bus, hallways, bathrooms, all throughout the school. Social distancing to the largest extent possible, hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette among students and staff, and again, this is for all students and staff in the schools. Proper cleaning and disinfection, along with contact tracing in collaboration with the local health department. Again, these are from the Centers for Disease Control. So you can see when you look at these, and if you could go back to the previous slide, basically for each one I'll go down. The lowest risk of transmission is when your incidence rate is below 5. When your percent positive is below 3%, and then when you've implemented all 5 strategies correctly and consistently. The lower risk is when our incidence rate is between 5 and below 20. Then your percent positive is 3 to 5, below 5%. And then again, if you've implemented all 5 strategies. Moderate risk is when you're between 20 and below 50, 5 to 8, below 8% for percent positive, and then if you've implemented 3 to 4 strategies correctly and consistently. Then the next slide, you can see that higher risk of transmission is when the incidence rate is over 50, but below 200. Your percent positive is 8% to just under 10%, or equal to 10. And then you've implemented 1 to 2 strategies correctly. Then highest risk is when you're above 200, above 10% for percent positive, and implemented no strategies correctly and consistently. So again, these are provided by the CDC to help the school system make the correct decision. So next, I'll share with you where we are in Forsyth County at this time. You can see this shows the new daily case count and incidence rate per 100,000 from September 6th to September 26th. We have given you an extra week. We have 3 weeks of data. The CDC recommends looking at 14 days, which begins on the 13th on this chart. We can show 3 weeks and to show this trend. And you can see when you look at our incidence rate, we fall into the lower risk because we are between 5 and 20 on our lower risk. Any questions about this slide? I see one from Ms. Motsinger. I see a hand raised from Ms. Motsinger.
Yes, what was the number of new cases reported today in Forsyth County?
Yes, they were reported today, but this information is tabulated by our epidemiologist every week.
You know, I'm just asking about today because my understanding, I'm looking at these numbers, but I heard somebody say we had 85 cases today. Is that correct?
We had 85 cases today, and the Department of Health and Human Services reported technical issues which prevented some laboratory data files from being processed in the NC COVID reporting system. So as a result, those cases and test data is likely the cause for the higher case count reported today, but we are going to monitor the daily case count and report any trends should they develop. As you can see, when you look at the averages, we're around 25 to 30 cases per day.
Okay. I have other questions, but I was wanting you to complete.
Okay.
I feel like you could complete what your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Sweat.
And I'll go to, so you can see that as again, where the incidence rate, you can see what that is. That is the green line, and it goes up and down, looking at the daily case count. And then you can see linearly, the daily rate is trending slightly down. But again, based on the CDC
Ms.
guidance.
Bramer, I do have a question.
Yes.
I have my hand up. I see that this is showing just the 26th, but it's my understanding that it is an overall pattern that it went up the 27th, 28th, 29th, and today. So it's not going down and holding down. It is increasing, which would be tied to an event like Labor Day, because there is a long incubation period, there's a long delay on testing, and then there's a long delay for it getting from Health and Human Services to us to this type of report. So this report does not reflect correct long-term information through October 1st.
Well, again, we do believe as far as Labor Day is concerned, that window of opportunity was around the 20th, that we would see a spike from any Labor Day activities.
But the medical.
So what I'll say, Board Member Bramer, if we can let the presentation, be finished, then we can ask key questions. I think right now it's kind of hard to follow what he's saying because you have some disagreement, but if we let him make his point, then you can follow up with any questions or concerns you have. I appreciate it. So if the presenter can go ahead and move through the presentation, then we can ask questions from the board. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. So as you can see for this slide, per the CDC guidance, we are at lower risk. And then next is the percent positive. Next slide, please. So this shows our daily labs and the percent positive from September 6th through September 26th. And although this is trending down, just when you see the fluctuations, we are in the higher, not higher, we're in the moderate risk between 5 and 8% positive. So that, again, what I've shared with you back to my first slides is the two core indicators, the incidence rate, number of new cases per 100,000 persons with the last 14 days, then the percent positives during the last 14 days. Then the next piece is those mitigation strategies, those 5 strategies that the school must implement. I'd be happy to have any questions. As I said before, I got Dr. Miller, Dr. Old, Glenda Dancy.
Thank you. I think Board Member Bramer, you were asking some questions. I think Mr. Swift wanted some clarification around some data he was sharing. Board Member Bramer.
Yes. Sorry, my mic was off. It's my understanding that there is indeed a delay there is 10 to 14 days incubation period, but beyond that, there's a delay with Quest and LabCorp and getting the test completed and back in a timely manner. And on top of that, it then has to go to the Health and Human Services and be collated. I'm saying that you're telling me through the 26th, you have everything that is supposed to be 25 days later, and that's not possible. So how can we see what's really happening when we don't actually have the end date?
And I would ask, I don't know if Dr. Old, if you would like to weigh in. I know that the average response time for lab results now is 3 to 5 days. It's actually gotten better than it was back in the summer. I don't know, Dr. Ohl, if you might.
Yeah, I'm here. Let me turn my camera on. So, I mean, this is something that epidemiologists and infectious diseases deal with all the time. I would say if you're looking at the COVID dashboard for the state, you have two ways of looking at it. You have a way of looking at it is when the test was actually performed versus when the test was resulted. And then if you look at it when the test was resulted, you'll actually see a little shaded area where the data is a little bit, not totally correlated. What happened today with the big bump, and that big bump wasn't just Forsyth County, that was in most counties in North Carolina. It had to do with counting antigen tests. As I think a lot of people know, we're starting to shift a little bit from all PCR tests to doing antigen tests because the quicker, the faster you get the result back before the person leaves the point of care. The databases for adding those in are still being vetted a little bit. And so today's bump reflected some antigen tests that have been collected over the last week, and they just tossed it in today. And that's what accounts for that. I would say that my overall assessment of the data from the state as well as from our county is that our case numbers are actually relatively stable. They go up a little bit on a day, they go down a little bit on a day. And so if you're hanging on it day to day, you end up getting caught up a little bit in acute changes that may not mean so much. Here in Forsyth County, actually, our numbers are down and slowly going down. I'd like to see them go down faster, of course, but they're still on their way down. Our percent positivity in Forsyth County has been hovering between 2 and 3% for the last 7 to 10 days now, which is a real sweet spot. I can also tell you, because I have access to Novant and Wake Forest data systems independently, that our case numbers have declined over the last month and have been relatively stable over the last week, as well as our hospitalizations and our percent positivities for both symptomatic people and asymptomatic people hasn't changed. If you look at our county for people that we survey who are coming in for procedures, so these are just asymptomatic people coming from any areas, our percent positivity in that is about 0.2 to 0.5%. Wake Forest percent positivity amongst all its students is running at about 0.3 to 0.4%, and that includes with targeted surveillance. So right now we're at a little bit of a sweet spot epidemiologically, to tell you the truth. We're a heck of a lot better than we were in the summer. We're probably about where we were in early April. And there was an indication about what metrics people want to use. You know, as a doctor, you know, I look at metrics as being, you know, the health of the whole entire patient. And if you get looking at one metric and another metric, when one is up and the other's down, and they don't all agree, look at the health of the system. And right now we got a little bit of a sweet spot epidemiologically. I would predict in January, February, and March it might get worse. So it's good to get things started and going if that's what people want to do, when it's a little easier to do it.
I think there is a question from Board Member Burke. Board Member Burke, we may be having some audio issues with you. Can we go to Board Member Motzinger while we straighten out your audio?
First, thank you all for being here. I appreciate that so much. I have a question. I know the CDC has kind of changed their metrics over time, as opposed, so initially it was total case numbers, and we were looking at numbers of people hospitalized, and yet the new metrics seem to have shrunk. One of my big concerns, obviously, is the New York Times did a recent article about the CDC and getting a lot of political pressure to change metrics, and particularly to push the opening of schools because of the current administration. So that concerns me, because that makes me wonder, why are we not looking at broader metrics and that they have been changed? I'm a PA, I work at a university, so I am very well aware. One of my concerns about the percentage positive is we're now doing a lot more batch testing of large groups of students. So we're changing who's in the batch of who's getting tested, and I'm wondering how that impacts the metrics.
Yeah, I'll be happy to address both of those. So the batch testing doesn't change it, because if your batch is positive, then you have to drill down and find the individual who actually made it positive. So
no, I'm sorry, I was unclear. It's just we're now, for example, on university campuses, companies will come in and test several hundred students at a time who are asymptomatic.
I won't get into the details of that, but you have to look at those percentages different than your symptomatic people and separate them.
Right, but they're in those
I wanted
numbers.
to address your other question too, because I think it's an important one about the CDCs and their changing of metrics. Yeah, I don't like it either that the CDC's been under pressure that frankly I've not ever seen before. In the metrics that they changed for the schools, though, I'm not sure that was due to that. I think a lot of it was from experience, actually, because since early August, we've had some school systems across the country, school systems in Europe, and now even private schools here in our own area that have been open for 6 weeks or so. We're getting information from them. And I thought I would add a little bit to Joshua's 5 points from the CDC. I think that helping schools get through COVID comes down to 5 things. One is getting sizes of classes and cohorts of people, as small as you can. 2, physically distance as much as possible. Number 3, wear the mask. You got to wear the mask, and it's really a big, huge mitigation strategy because it works. And then 4 is you need to cohort. So when you contact trace, that you're not pulling out large groups of people. You can pull out small groups of people and do it somewhat surgically rather than close down an entire class. So if you cohorting works, which is why kids are asked to stay in the same classroom for more time. It's probably better to change in and out the teachers because it's just one person than to have a Chinese fire drill of students moving from room to room. And then lastly, you have to have good contact tracing, and you have to do it quickly. And then you have to have a committed group of parents and who are willing and able to monitor the health of their kids and make sure they're not going to school when they're sick. And if they've had contact with a positive person, they need to stay home. They're in quarantine. And if they've been sick and have had a positive test, obviously you have to stay home. Those things are really critical because I can tell you now from information we've got from a lot of across the country, when you have positive cases in schools, it's not due to transmission in the school. If the school is doing those things that we just talked about, transmission in the schools is very unusual. And what's happening is people get positive on the outside, either from the family or another social contact, a sleepover, a beach vacation, or whatever. and then they come to school in a pre-symptomatic way. The next day they don't feel so well, they get tested, they're positive, and now you have to quarantine a few people from school. And that's how the cases are going up there. It's not from on-school transmission. So, the setting, if you do everything right, keeps you safe. But, it's a little bit, the devil's in the logistics. And that's really where I feel that the focus should be.
Well, so, one of the reasons we haven't seen much transmission happening from children, of course, is because they haven't been in school. And I guess in today's paper, it said, I'm reading in today's Winston-Salem Journal, where it says school studies suggest that in-person learning can be safe in communities with low transmission rates, but might increase transmission rates in communities where transmission is already high. And that's from the CDC and its Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. And it just concerns me deeply that we are about to go into the fall and the transmission issues seem to be, there are a couple things that are coming up, right? And what we're learning about this. All people don't spread it equally. There seem to be super spreaders. There seem to be people who just replicate massive amounts of virus and pass it on. And I even am reading some of the concerns about contact tracing, that's always looking forward instead of looking backwards. So I do have a lot of concerns. My other big concern about the medical risk is, in everything I'm reading, it sounds to me like this really ends up being a vascular disease, or that's one of the big manifestations of it is vascular impact. And my concern is even in, certainly like myocarditis is possible after any viral illness, but we're seeing some. So could you please address that? Because I have a lot of fear, honestly, about what the long-term implications of even a mild case of this virus are.
Well, there were kind of a lot of questions in there. So regarding...
I'm like that, sorry.
Okay. Hey, that's all right. That's part of my job. So the vascular aspects is an issue mostly in people who are in the intensive care units. And I won't get into the details of why that is. And they actually don't, most of those don't even have virus around anymore. They're dealing with the inflammatory aspects. They tend to be older and have comorbid conditions. The long-term ramifications, I mean, technically we don't 100% know because it hasn't been long-term. I mean, you need long-term to find out. I mean, all viral illnesses, some of them have things that happen down the road. I think most teachers and teenagers are familiar with infectious mononucleosis. And some people, it takes 2-3 months when you feel normal again. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's not the fact with COVID as well. The bottom line is that, young people are going to get infected. And the younger you are, the less likely. If you're over the age of 12, most people who are over the age of 12 want to behave like an adult. And they kind of behave like an adult medically as far as COVID goes. So their transmission risk and the risk of getting it's about the same as an adult. But the fact is that the school if you're looking at whether or not a school is open, what you want to know is what's the risk of the school contributing to transmission. And if you break it down, I mean, we just went into phase 3. What's the risk of a movie theater contributing to transmission? What's the risk of a bar contributing, and a fitness center, and all those things have been worked out. And the schools are actually pretty far down on the list as far as their risk of transmission occurring in the school itself. The toughest thing for the school is the logistics. It really is. I mean, running a school is hard on a good day. But when you're trying to, do it with COVID around and having to do all the safety things at work, I mean, it just makes it harder. And so, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. And I think a lot of schools have shown that it can be done. Including our higher education in the area. As well as our, so anyway,
a lot of the higher education is not transmitting because the majority of their classes are online. So they're not actually meeting in person.
Yeah, well, that's not entirely true. We got 7,500 students back at Wake Forest now. And things are going great. Davidson, Elon. It comes down to the.
Elon's not doing great. Yeah. So.
Anyway, we should open it up for some other questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member
Barbara.
Board Member Burke.
Barb?
Your audio, Board Member Burke, is out. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ohl. I have a few questions. My first question is about the 85 new cases right here in Forsyth County today. And so, with the 85 new cases, that does mean that puts us in the red range at a higher risk for the uncontrolled spread of COVID. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. So that we really didn't have 85 new cases today. This is cases that the state threw in through their counting system that have come through the last week or so regarding antigen testing, and they just tossed them all in today. So I think when you look tomorrow, it's going to look a lot different for you, unless they have more cases to toss in that should have been there last week, for instance. But and the other thing is, I caution you about looking at day-to-day cases. One of the first things I learned as in the Navy doing epidemiology is wait for trends and look at the health of the total system and what's going on. And if you hang up too much on just one day, you end up finding yourself chasing down a lot of rabbits in the rabbit holes that you don't need to. So let's see what happens tomorrow.
Board Member Burke, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. I am concerned about the state tossing in 85, and since it was tossed in, I do want to follow up with some questions just in case we find out that toss in is actually accurate. So my second question is, does that put us at the risk of being in the red range? You said yes. And does that put us at risk for uncontrollable spread? So my next question is, does that also, if the 85 number was tossed in accurately, does that restart the 14-day count tomorrow? If that 85 number for Forsyth County today, if that is an accurate number, does that start the 14-day recount for Forsyth County tomorrow?
So, well, the first part I want to correct, I would not put us in the red zone because of the case rectification, number rectification today. I would look at what's going to happen over the next few days. But I also know, because I read the epi reports that come out of the state, that they're wrestling a little bit about getting the antigen tests in. And does it change the 14-day total? Technically it will not, but it will maybe change the way some of us look at it, because antigen testing normally isn't reported so well, but there's a lot of things that are different this year, and the way we report that's going to capture a lot more tests. And obviously, if you have more people being tested with antigens in point of care and physicians' offices and stuff, where it's easier to get tested, then you have to look at the total test number and then the positive, and then you get your new percent positive. So it's going to take 2 or 3 days for all of this to sort of sort itself out, because we just started doing this new reporting system about a week ago.
Okay, so because it's new, we really are not 100% certain, and it is possible that this could throw us into the orange rapid spread range. So I have one more question. Let's see. We have talked a lot about guidelines and following guidelines and trying to be safe, but we kept using the word if students follow these guidelines, if the teachers follow these guidelines. And so I just want to make sure that we understand we will not be able to, without a policy in place, make sure that students keep a mask on all day without a policy in place. And I don't know what policies have been added to this plan. I just got this plan yesterday afternoon as far as disinfecting and cleaning and the responsibilities that the teachers will have, and how long these supplies will last.
Board Member Burke, I don't mean to interrupt you. I think Dr. Old is probably saying this is above my pay grade. He's just kind of answering questions about on the medical side. If we can hold our questions about policy and our plan to move in with Dr. Harrison, that will be helpful, because I know that, Dr. Old and this other, the medical team is extending themselves to just kind of answer questions dealing with the medical side. So I appreciate you being considerate of their time.
Yeah, I'll address could we be moving into the orange range? I don't think so. I mean, looking at data from health systems as well, I don't think you're going to see that. At least not for some time. The second part is you said about the if people follow those things, and you're right. That's it, right? I mean, we know what works. We know what can keep people safe. So like with anything else, you got to work at that and show people that they are the stakeholder. They're the one. They're the one who benefits the most. So they need to do what they need to be doing. I can tell you from our private school experience and our in and around the area, the younger kids, man, they have no trouble wearing masks. And I've been really, really surprised, very pleasantly surprised, actually. They do great. High school students, they reflect what they see around them. So if their parents are not into masks, or if their teacher's not, then they're going to be less likely to wear it. So when I talked about parents being really involved and stakeholders in this, it's really true. We need to model the behavior for our older kids. But and I won't address anything about the plans. That's not my role here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Old, and thank you, Chair Woodbury. I only asked about guidelines to Dr. Old because he mentioned guidelines in his presentation. Thank you.
Yes. Board Member Bramer.
I have two, one I think for Dr. Old and one I'm not sure who can answer. The first one is, I'm kind of following what Ms. Burke was saying, and can a 5-year-old, it's so important to wear that mask. If you don't wear that mask, then you're spreading. Do we believe that a 5-year-old is truly capable of wearing that mask all day and properly taking it off to eat and properly using the bathroom with a mask, a 5-year-old?
Well, they do. And they do. There's tricks with this, and you can talk to pediatricians about it. And we featured some of these on on the Facebook thing that I do on Thursdays. But yeah, they do. I was skeptical, just like you, when we all first started out with this. How are you going to get a 5-year-old to wear a mask? But they do. In fact, you know who tells me? Dad, you forgot your mask. When we get in the car, it's my 6-year-old. So she's keeping me honest. like I said, it's just, they do. They model what's around them and they want to be, they want to do the right thing.
Okay, my second question, I'm not sure who can answer it, but I just have a question about a lot of times we hear about the psychology of having kids at home and they're not socially interacting and they're not in an environment together learning. So if we put them in an environment together learning, but we tell them they have to wear a mask, they cannot touch a book, they cannot touch a toy, they cannot play, and they have to stand away from a teacher behind plexiglass, is that going to leave with you kind of scar that says you can't trust people?
Well, that's a question for a child psychologist, but I can approach a little bit of it. Some of those things you're talking about, like not being able to touch a book or a toy or stuff, there are ways to do that safely. And we don't have to talk about it right now, but I'd be happy to share that with whoever would like to know later. But I think kids like being together, and whether it's in an experience that's not quite normal. I mean, and I was listening to some of the comments, the public comments earlier on, and it was mentioned that nothing's normal right now, and our children have to be able to integrate that and understand that, and as a parent, and as teachers, we need to help with that. Sometimes it's not easy, and does it make the teacher's job a little bit harder? Yeah, it does. I won't sugarcoat that. But I think once the kids get used to the normal, at least the experiences that I've been hearing from others, is that they like it. But I'm not a child psychologist.
Thank you. Next, we have Board Member Parker with a question.
So when developing a metric, a 14-day count of the percentage averages is a good recommendation for how many days to look at a count over like a 10-day rate or whatever. 14 on the rolling 2-day average, percentage averages. Is that, I'm sorry, can you not hear me?
And so you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, a 14-day count on the 2-day percentage running averages, is that a good day count as opposed to say a 10-day count, or is that you think the most reliable count?
Well, what I look at are 3 days, 7 day, and 14 days, and then I make sure that they all complement each other and are going the same way. I get asked a lot about what metrics should we use. I mean, businesses ask me, large corporations, schools, universities, and our own health system. What I think what it really comes down to is when you want to back off and change what you're doing to something that's more distanced, then the big thing is how are you doing? So if you're a university and you have cases and you have some transmission in the off-campus areas, which is where it's mostly there too, it's some friend group outside, but you're able to contact trace and quarantine them, then you're okay. You don't need to the time that you start thinking about, really going back to an all virtual situation, if you're in place, is when you kind of lose control. You don't know where your cases are coming from. You don't know exactly where the transmission is, and you're not so sure. And then you also look at the metrics of what's going on in the community around you. And you could kind of add all of that together. So again, it's a little hard to stick one number on anything. You kind of try to take it as a whole and see what you think is where you're happy.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions of the, from the health team or to Mr. Swift?
Yes, this is Elizabeth again. I wanted to ask again, going back to the two metrics that were presented by Mr. Swift and the change the CDC made in terms of what metrics are measured. What recommendation would you give us, Dr. Ohl, as to what metrics our district should take into consideration both and when to reopen schools and what to monitor? Would you say those two metrics cover it, or would you say that perhaps, you know, the original 4 metrics are more reasonable?
Well, I think the metrics that mean the most are percent positivity and trends in case counts. As far as what metrics would I think would be suitable for us to open here in Forsyth County, I'll just lay it on the line. I think right now they're suitable. As to what metrics you would start to look at as far as when to start pulling back, I would look at symptomatic people's positivity rates, which we can get out of our health systems to being above 20%. All comers symptomatic positivity rates would be between somewhere above 10 to 15, depending on how contact tracing is going. Trends in overall case numbers, but not just the overall number itself, but where those cases are occurring and in what age groups and how and why. So, you look at the two numbers that you discussed on, but you modify it and you put it all together into one big package. Those of us who do EPI kind of understand that sometimes it's not, it's a little bit of gray, and it's a little bit of your overall gestalt of where things might be heading. And also understanding the science of the virus to some extent. So I hope that answers your question. It's not an easy one to answer.
No, and of course it's confusing. I know the American Academy of Pediatrics just put out a statement about 10% of COVID-19 cases are now in children, up from 2.2% in April. And this came out from them on September 29th, so a couple of days ago, that they're concerned that the percentage in children is definitely going up since schools have been back in session.
Well, actually, it was back. It actually originally went up back in July. In fact, our percent positivity in kids around here have been at 10%. Really since the latter part of July. Some of that reflects the fact that kids are out and about now and are getting tested, whereas before they weren't. But it's really not just the schools. It's just the fact most kids, where most kids get infected is who are under 12 anyway, is from their family, and then secondarily it's from their friends out in their play groups and such. But yeah, of course. So 10% in kids, that's actually kind of a low.
Right. No, I mean, but it's
right. When you look at, just one more thing to add. If you look at it, and Josh will tell you, because he's been harping on this, rightly so, for the last month, that the largest proportion of positivity in our county now is between the ages of 18 and 25.
Right.
It's young adults that where we're seeing, and that's like about 4 times the rate that we're seeing in the younger kids. But if you look at the percent positivity in children, which I can drill down to in our area, if you look at symptomatic kids who come in with symptoms of COVID, the percent positivity is about 6%, which means 6 kids out of 100 who look like they have COVID don't. They have something else. So it's not an unhit part of our population, but it is still at this point a less involved part of our population. Hospitalizations are less than 1% in the under 12 group.
So thank you, Dr. O. I do want to be very mindful of.
Excuse me, Ms. Woodbury.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you go in 1 second. I'm gonna let you go in 1 second, Board Member Mott-Singh. I just want to set the tone, and then I'll let you ask your question. So I do want us to be mindful that this team is coming for us to ask questions. And so I know that they may have other obligations, and we will need to, I'm sure, come back to them and ask more questions. So I don't want to keep them, too much more longer than we already have. So if Board Member Mott-Singh will take your last question, and then if board members have any more questions to this team, we can get them to the superintendent and wait patiently for them to get a response back, whether it be literally or maybe come back to our next board meeting. But I fear that if we don't let them go soon, they may not come back to offer their expertise. And I know they would, because they're community people too, but we just want to be mindful because we so much appreciate their time. So we'll let Board Member Mott-Singh ask the last question.
And I wanted to let people know, if I ever thought that this was turning into a presidential debate, I'll let you know I'm uncomfortable. But I don't feel that way at all.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes. My final question is about, particularly as point of care testing becomes much more available in expensive point of care testing, do you think that should be used in the school settings?
That is a phenomenally good question. A lot of the private schools in the area have opted to let the pediatricians still and our point of care medical areas do it. I have a little bit of reservations about putting point of care testing into a school setting right now. That's not to say you can come back and ask me the same question in December and I'll give you the same answer. There's a lot of these tests, we haven't had enough experience with them to know yet how well they would work like in a school setting. But it is a possibility. But right now, I think it's too early.
Thank you for your time, all of you. I appreciate it so much.
Yes, on behalf of the board, we thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Swift, for leading this team. And we hope to continue to work with your team so that we can keep our entire community safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. The next discussion item is Dr. Hairston, the superintendent, on reopening our schools.
Here. Thank you, Board Member Woodbury, and to all other board members. Thank you. I thought I had a little more space here, but that will be just fine. Let me just say that March 14th was the date that Governor Cooper asked us to close schools, and 4 months later, July 17th, we met to discuss July 14th, Governor Cooper announced going to Plan B, and we met on the 17th for Plan C. And the presentation I have to our board members is not a lot different. There's been some tweaking along the way, and we've had a subcommittee meet led by Chair of the committee, Ms. Parker, and so since the last time we met, this presentation has expanded a little bit, but pretty much it's the same presentation with some tweaks based on feedback from the community and our board members because we want to be responsive. So as I go through this, at the end of the presentation, we will want everybody to look like this. And we strive to have people be happy. But you know, we received hundreds of emails. Some want A, some want B, some want C. Some want some version of A. So you have a couple of hundred people that say I want A, but they want their version of A. And then you have people who want B and they want their version of B. And then you have people who want C and they want their version of C. And so if we're going to get to that point, there's just not a plan that's going to leave all of us feeling like we got 100% of what we wanted. But I can tell you that I work with a team and our board members have come as close as possible. So when we came to you board members, to our Board of Education, to you in July, we talked about a safe return plan, facilities readiness, budgetary needs, and community spread. And there were some holes in our plan. We just felt we didn't have enough time to close some of those gaps, and some of it was financial. And we've certainly been able to close some of those gaps since that time. So we still are looking at these four pieces and putting it together. And we, like everybody else, I have children, most of us in here have children. We want to create a safe, vibrant, and equitable learning community. Equitable is important because it's important that children receive access to learning, and not just some learning, but quality learning and instruction. And to develop a comprehensive evidence-based plan that really is thoughtful about reopening. So when we left July 17th, the board voted to allow us to remain in C only the first quarter. Only the first quarter. They did not vote to allow us to remain in C for the semester. It was the first quarter. So we very quickly began to work on what that would look like at the end of the first quarter. And to keep our staffs and community certainly as much as possible safe. We're not interested in contributing to community spread. It's a very scary thought. And we certainly want to be sure that we honor our parents and their demands for a good quality education. So these are goals we've gone over before, which means we look at safety, we look at equitable access. We really appreciate the learning centers that have been set up. We know the board members have gone out to learning centers. We audit learning centers. There's been a remarkable contribution to our students throughout. And our CARES team members have been just great. Positive relationships and interactions are very important to us as well. We don't like to hear about children being depressed and isolated and so forth and so on. So these are goals that we look at. So as we go through our plan, what did we look at? We just didn't willy-nilly come up with a plan. We did look at the CDC guidance. And the CDC guidance, respective of what's been said, is still important to us. We looked at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services Strong Schools Kit. We look at that on a regular basis. We pay attention to that. DPI has a wonderful Lighting the Way Forward kit. And we also have Winston-Salem Forsyth planning teams. We have hundreds of people on planning teams, planning PPE, planning the cleaning process, planning social distancing, getting our schools in order. And so this was not a process that we took lightly. Our Board of Education, Chair Woodbury appointed a subcommittee to really dig into this and be sure that we remained on task and kept us going with their own thoughts and ideas. We had teacher advisory council meetings, classified advisory council meetings. We talked to employees, parents, community surveys were sent, students and focus groups were held, and reopening checklists were developed. So what were the choices? And what continue to be the choices is C, where we are now, remote learning only. We asked for this quarter to prepare ourselves to ensure we had the dollars appropriate for PPE and to ensure we knew we could open safely. We looked at B, moderate social distancing, which you'll hear more about this evening, and that is a transition to a higher level. And then, of course, we've heard our governor give us permission to look at A more critically, which is a least restrictive environment for transitioning in. Up until yesterday, we were in 2.5, And really the significance in 2.5 had to do with the playgrounds. Playgrounds will be allowed to open upon arrival of equipment, and that means cleaning equipment that was there. And the rest of this had something, it had probably more to do with athletics and how many students we could have outside. But we were in 2.5, we're in tomorrow we'll be in phase 3, tomorrow at 5 p.m. And really when we looked at the aspects of phase 3, maybe some outdoor activities, those kinds of things, the number of guests you can have in various locations, but the school was not referenced specifically in those areas. So our safe return, what happened? We had district-wide planning teams since May. Our Board of Education approved, you all approved us to have a task force working on plans. Jan Atkinson, Lisa Scruggs, and Bill Powell became our core planning team, along with Sam, Dr. Mills, and Dion Jenkins over there. Myself, we were the core planning team relative to keeping the work moving. We had other teams led by Lauren Richards, Kevin, Cheryl, and all of our core leaders in the district had a team that they had to leave. Our Nicolette Grant, our Human Resources Department, and so they had their own district-wide planning team. Some of them invited principals, some invited teachers, but they all were required to have planning teams to devise our district-wide plan. And then last month we moved to school-level planning teams, which is logistics. And some of our teachers have called in about logistics. So every single school has a logistics planning team. And that team, because we can't plan for every school, we give them a checklist, and Kevin's going to pull that checklist up. We looked at building cleanliness. He's going to pull that checklist up just so you know what the planning teams focus on relative to logistics. He's going to take over my screen for just a minute and share that with you. Basically, this is the list that is audited before we will agree to open one school. And these are the, and I think I sent it to you all last month or at some point, but this is the checklist, the opening checklist, where we look at the entrance, we look at the exit doors, are they locked or unlocked, we're looking at tape on the floors, we're looking at, do you have your 3 signs about wear your mask, be sure you socially distance and wash your hands, keep your distance. We are looking at adequate number of screening teams and must have an adequate number of screening teams before they go in. The hand sanitizer available, the alcohol swabs. If you go up, the infrared thermometer is available. Collection container for attestation forms, directional stickers, hallways and common areas. All of the little details, plexiglass shields installed in central desk areas, hand sanitizers available at the front office, and we can keep going and going and going. So these are kinds of logistical things that we take care of because we take student safety very serious. Teachers will have PPE. It was $500,000 given to us, or not given to us, but we received $500,000 for special education PPE. Some PPE we cannot receive until we vote to go from Plan C to another plan. Okay, so that will not happen until that time. But every Wednesday, Deputy Superintendent Tricia McManus and the area superintendents hold a conference with principals to walk through all of the logistical checklists, and Darryl Walker and Lauren Richards will lead a plan to audit those checklists before we walk back in the building, and those audits are due to my office daily as they complete them. And so as we've gone through this, we know that staff and teachers must wear masks. The Board of Education did approve a policy, just as a reminder, for student masks, and that's a part of the code of conduct with discipline consequences. And we passed the policy for staff and employees, and that also carries the weight of advisement to possible dismissal. So there are severe consequences. We looked at the best practices. We actually participated in a national collaboration through Harvard with Gwinnett County, Cincinnati, looking at best practices for reopening. We participated in PTEC, which is our triad schools. Although they're smaller schools, they have great ideas. We participated with large district, as Chair Woodbury learned today. We meet twice a week at 7 a.m. until we stop planning. And so there's been no small effort, and I'm proud of the executive team because they have Jabbar-like meetings. But here's what I want you to really know. People call us for ideas. They are calling Kevin for ideas. So people know that we have done a lot of work, and if I haven't communicated that, I have to apologize because people are calling us for how are you social distancing, how are you setting up your classrooms, and those kinds of things. And so as we look, I guess I'm in control again, Kevin. We will have a transparent reporting process. We will have that's later in the presentation. We'll have a dashboard where you can see every day the positive identifications of teachers, of staff in the building, and then those that have been quarantined, and so forth and so on. And we've had a pretty robust campaign. If you go to our Safe Return website, we have how-to videos. We've started podcasts, informational sessions so parents know what's going on. And staff identified to follow up if a person fails an entry screen. I remember the first Sunday after we had done our screening for the week, Dion Jenkins called me and said somebody's checked the wrong box for the screening. And so we had to go through every single person and email and say, you checked no when you should, and so we actually go through that and when we have teachers check no to the wrong box or to a box that yes, I've had tested positive, or yes, we follow up with them. And that's not always in every school district. We also have an opening manual that will be published depending on the vote this evening, an opening manual that has been put together by our team. And again, staff training videos are out there on our website. All you have to do is go to Our Safe Return, and Brent has posted those along with Chris Runge and Zach. We have school facilities audits that are due by the 7th, and I showed you the checklist, and those are due to me by the 7th. And transportation residential, this started because we needed to know how many kids were going to request transportation so we could plan properly. When I came to you in July, there was some concern about budgetary needs. We just didn't have the money to do these things, but we've since received additional CARES dollars, so we are actually hiring additional school health professionals or nurses to help us with our contact tracing and with our isolation rooms, and simply to be available for principals. We have additional bus supervision that we have also budgeted for, because bus drivers need to have some support as they collect those attestation forms and as they screen children as they get on. And we also have the appropriate daily cleaning of all buildings. We do have the appropriate sanitation. We have the budget for it. You all approved the CARES budget. We feel comfortable about what we have in there. And so, and when I hear people say, well, on a regular basis, there's no soap in the restrooms, well, I can guarantee you we have so much soap now, it's probably silly. So we have soap, okay? So what I promised Chair Woodbury I would do is I would pause after the student section, pause after the teacher section, pause after the next section, if that's okay. So our proposal is, or my proposal is Plan B, and our team grades pre-K through 12, considering vision, mission, objectives. And so as we look at what we've considered, just so you know, we've considered safe and healthy protocols, and we've looked at social distancing to be sure that we could do this, and we've actually recommended certain numbers of students in buildings. And as you heard Dr. Ohl, it's about social distancing and masking. We looked at the size of the building, the number of classrooms, the number of students in the building, the layout of the building. I'm exhausted with plans and plans and plans of classrooms, and we have looked at every single thing, passing in the hallways, how many students can go in and exit, how many students can be screened at one time. We've looked at parent pickup, parent drop-off, looking at the numbers of cars that can be on a campus at one time. We've, to an exhaustive level, looked at food services, how we could get children meals throughout the week, plus how we can continue to deliver in the community. And we've also looked at options for virtual versus in-person. So what are the options for my proposed Plan B? One is for children to remain on the virtual academy with synchronous instruction. If they're in the virtual academy and they're happy, we want them to remain there. We also want to provide our students in person by cohort combined with remote learning. Now, what does that mean? That means that if children so desire to attend in person based on the cohort model, we'd like to give them that opportunity with your permission. That would be combined for children who are enrolled in a school, and we've changed this because we've heard it from our parents and from you all as board members. It said, if a child is enrolled at Meadowlark and I really don't want to go in person, I would still like that remote learning option. So this camera that you see here will give us that option for children to do that. And so we will send preference forms home to students so they can either remain, they can go face-to-face, or they can elect to be remote. Now, some teachers will have to learn how to use this technology, so remote for a while might be recorded lessons and packets until they learn how to use the technology. But we feel comfortable that in the next few weeks, teachers will learn how to allow children to remain remote if they so desire and remain in their schools. So we will send preference homes, depending on your vote, to parents on Monday, and they will have to elect. We also know that that will reduce the numbers of students in classrooms. So if a teacher has split a class A-B cohort and we find that only 12 of them want to participate, then maybe we can offer them instruction every day versus 2 days per week. But we have to see how the preference forms go. And then we also have remote learning from home, which may include, again, synchronous or video recorded lessons. Now, I want to note for high school is different because high school, we did not open a virtual academy. A virtual academy is in existence for grades K through 8. And there are 3,600 students in that academy. We had 1,600 high school students with courses that they wanted: Latin, German, drama, dance, everything you can imagine. And so the feeling was we would not be able to offer all of those courses. So we asked them to participate in synchronous learning the first quarter at their respective schools. And why it's taking so long for the high school is this technology we can install in December. Right now we're working on elementary to accommodate parents, and middle, and by December we can get all of our technology in place for high school so that high school students can have the same choice, synchronous or virtual at home. And that's what we're looking at for schools. So what would the dates be? Monday, we have 94 students that would start Monday, and those are our nursing students, our firefighter students that need those hands-on credits. And so those teachers and those students would start Monday, and they would be in one location. We would start the pre-K and EC pre-K teachers and all other support staff, teachers, clerical, parapros, custodians who are not at the bus drivers, central office, everyone would start on the 12th, but the students in pre-K and EC pre-K would start the 26th. And we say as soon as the 26th because if something should happen and we have to pause, we would want to have the permission to pause and say that something just catastrophic happened and we said, you know, this is not a good idea. We would want to be able to come back and change that date. As soon as November 2nd, we would bring in K3, 6th grade, EC separate, who are in separate settings. And there would be EC, OCS, ESL students in the academy, elementary, middle, and high school self-contained special education students, K through 3 and grade 6. As soon as November 16th, we would bring in grades 4, 5, 7, and 8, and high school again. High school has in-person testing January 11th, which is the first day we come back, or within that first week, and we will need to have that time to do in-person testing, and then classes would start January 25th. So what is social distancing? Just to make sure we're aware, having fewer students in the building, which you heard the presentation, minimizes the overcrowding, the drop off and the pickup, and we feel the technology will reduce a lot of the, now we don't want students who say, well, I'm going to be in person sometime and then I'm going to be virtual. You have to pick, you can't decide, I'm just gonna waffle between. You will have to select one of the two. And so we're looking at dividing the students into 2 cohorts or 4 cohorts, and I'll explain that. So elementary schools, I'm recommending that pre-K through 3rd grade attend school at 4 days a week, and I'll explain why the Wednesday is important. We're looking at 4 and 5. I'm recommending that they attend school 2 days per week. I'm recommending that the EC, the separate setting assigned students, and the ESL students attend 4 days per week. So this is what this looks like. For pre-K through 3rd grades and our special needs students that I referenced, they would attend school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday would become the flex day. What we feel based on our teams and our work with other districts is that Wednesday is the day we want to get in there, clean the building, spray everything down, and make sure that everything is where it needs to be, because it's also a transition day for grades 4 and 5. 4 and 5 would attend Monday, Tuesday in the first cohort, and Thursday, Friday in the next cohort. But let's say that a significant number of students say, well, I would like to be virtual. So this camera system and the technology we have places that school at a low population because you have virtual. Then these students could attend more days, and we would appreciate the flexibility to ramp up the numbers based on the numbers of children that are out of the building. And this is something that we feel is doable right away. When you look at 6 through 8, large schools are Clemens, Jefferson, Meadowlark, and Southeast. The challenges there is we just don't have enough space. Those schools are big choice schools. It's not the residential students that are causing the challenge, it's the choice students in these schools that cause the overflow of student population. So what would happen is the schools in green, students would attend Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, would be 2 cohorts, and the other schools would attend 1 day a week or 2 days every 2 weeks, and we would monitor. So again, if Clemens has a significant number of students that opt for virtual, we would then increase the number of students who have the 2 days a week at this time. 9 through 12, similar situation, East, Glen, Mount Tabor, North, Parkland, North only because it's under construction, Reagan, Reynolds, and West. And so the initial proposal is that they attend 2 days every 2 weeks, and 2 days because they're on a block schedule. And the other schools would attend 2 days per week right off the cuff there. And Atkins is a little larger, and we're watching that, but we know that also a lot of students will opt for virtual. A lot of students are already in virtual for that. So what I'd like to propose is that we adopt this number, and then we send out the preference form, see what children are going to stay home, what children want virtual, and I think that'll help us with the numbers. But it can't be back and forth. It cannot be back and forth. We also had a good idea from, I think, Board Member Crowley, was to how could we use the Career Center to reduce some numbers, and we'll have time to look at that. So this will be the schedule. Those on 2 cohort days, middle and high would attend Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with our, ability to increase those days should we have more children on virtual. And then the 4 cohort days would be every other week, 2 days every other week, and we would be looking to increase that should we have the preference forms come in. And just so you know, most districts are seeing a 60-40. They're actually seeing about 40% of their students opt for virtual out of the traditional schools, so we feel that our students will have a similar response. So I'll pause there and see if you have any questions for the student section.
Dr. Harrison, have we thought about, I heard a couple parents mention that they had kids in middle school where they could be in the 4 cohort, and they asked about switching enrollment to a school with, switching from Clemens to Haynes so that they could get 2 days a week.
That would be fine.
so people can switch schools if they
Just
want.
so we don't overcrowd.
That's what I'm worried.
But
is
yeah,
could
so
we have bunch
there's a
jumping?
certain number that we could accommodate, but we would welcome that.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I just want to, first of all, thank all of the students and the parents and the educators for all of your emails, all of your phone calls. We welcome it. That's who we are. We are your elected officials. And just keep them coming, because that's how we know what you're thinking, and that's how we can make some good decisions. So I want to thank you all for all of that. And I've really, even though I haven't been able to respond to every single one of them, I have pretty much read every one, and I intend to, but I just really appreciate that. And I want to just also comment that Board Member Crawley and I, we went to Davie County and Stokes County because we really wanted to see if this could work. We really, we're trying to do all of our homework. And so we attended a high school in Davie and an elementary school in Stokes County. And by golly, it was working. And we were really impressed. And the kids were wearing their masks. And we spoke with administration, and they said, one of the key things here is we've got to have transparency. We've got to communicate with the teachers, parents. We've got to move in such a way that we can make changes if necessary. And it took a little while, but I was just thrilled to see that it is possible. So I was really excited about that. And Dr. Hairston, you had mentioned to me about high school, because we had received a lot of questions about, well, how come we're not going to start till January? And you had mentioned about, because we were in Plan C and some of the larger metropolitan areas that also were in Plan C, we're not able to get the swivel cameras in time, and so we're still waiting for that, and that's one of the reasons. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So it's not swivel, but it's the tech. Yeah, it's the technology we'll use to create a virtual environment. And so what'll happen when the teachers come in, we have to first train over 1,000 teachers. We have over 1,000 high school teachers. We're emphasizing right now. Kevin he will finish up the elementary schools October 16th. We will then move to the middle schools November 2nd through the 30th, and then December we'll have high schools. So we had 1,600 high school students register for virtual. We could not accommodate them if we brought the teachers back in December. So students need to come back when we're able to offer the 1,600 students the virtual, and we'll have all of that ready in January. Okay? Did that answer, Ms.
Yeah.
Kaplan? Okay, thank you.
Could you go over again a little more on our transportation?
I have a presentation, a whole section.
Good, okay, because I'm looking at where I've gotten a lot of mail, and if we could do that, and I know I didn't know you were going to, when you were going to, but I thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Harris, I don't mean to interrupt, but I cannot see whether other board members coming in virtually have their hands up. So Kevin, could you let me know if?
Oh, Ms. Bird, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. If you would just let me know.
You may be on mute, Board Member Burke. We can't hear you. I can't see you're still muted, Board Member Burke. Is she still muted? Yes, ma'am. Okay. We'll move forward, and if
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
But then maybe Barbara will have her.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So again, I think Ms. Kaplan said it very well. We really do appreciate all of the feedback that we've gotten. And then I think the thing that I'm hearing real loud and clear is that we have flexibility as we start to transition into Plan B. Mm-hmm. And I think that was something that I heard from parents. Please don't lock us down. It looked bad on paper, but I think that's why it's so important to hear from the superintendent about this is a living document and based on where we are. And so, and I will even say, I'm that hard-headed board member, and that superintendent says, oh, here's another email from board member Jones, because I had to hear that as well. Like, I needed to understand that we're really opening up more and more. And so, you know, I'm really proud of our superintendent and our team. It's not perfect. I don't think we're not living in a perfect place. But I will tell you, every time that I have asked for something or clarifying something, and sometimes, again, it takes me a while to grab it, but that they have worked to make us see that. And I think I'm seeing you all in the room starting to nod, like, okay, we're seeing that that we're being heard, and we're trying to do this, and we're also trying to do it in a safe way and being very intentional. So I thank you for doing that. And really tonight, I think hearing from you and going through this is really opening up for our parents to really, you know, our community to really see what this looks like. So I just want to go on the record as saying that it's not perfect, but boy, I feel like we are in a really good place. And I will say, knowing folks at the state level and that they really do look to our team here to so we have a good group of people, and I feel comfortable where we're heading. So just again, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Okay, so with the employees, wanted to go over their start dates. Again, Mr. Sherman has worked with the teachers starting on Monday, just to give them a little heads up in case you all vote for B, that Monday will be their first day. And they really wanted to start before Monday, but we wanted to make sure we had your support. Teachers for the other and support staff would return on the 12th. And then, and a part of the reason for bringing them back in transitions is that some teachers and employees will have requests for leave and requests for different things, and HR could be overwhelmed if we just brought everybody back at one time. So we want to be able to help with those requests and make sure we can place people appropriately. And of course, the high school teachers will come back November 30th so that we could train them on the technology and have them in the facility as we move. And you'll see testing again in person January 11th, and again instruction the 25th. So what type of support exists for employees? Again, when we had this survey in July, a lot of teachers and employees felt like that was my document to say I needed support. What really wasn't. It was just to give us a heads up, you might need support. You have to fill out a more detailed request for support. We also have an employee assistance program, which had for a long time, to help with those that have mental and emotional needs, and some people have been referred for those needs. Employees with medical conditions that prevent them from returning to work will contact Brenda Bourne or Kim Bazula. And those ladies are already working with some employees on strategies for leave or return to work. So there is a process in place, but they start with the principal. I want to go back. They start first by going to their principal or supervisor, indicating I feel that I'm not going to be able to return and I need support. We don't want the employees working outside the supervisor and they not know that they have to fill that position. There are leave opportunities, extended paid sick leave up to 80 hours still exist. Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act up to 12 weeks of paid leave, and that does that's FMLA. And of course, no, that's different than FMLA, isn't it? It's expanded FMLA. But this does expire December 31st, and employees should contact HR if they want to explore leave options, depending on your vote. So reopening. Transportation, and I did list transportation as a challenge, not because it's not going to be a challenge to some folks, it's just a challenge that we have to work to understand. There are guidelines that we follow that I mentioned before, guidelines that we have to follow relative to transportation. And under B, schools are required to adhere to all requirements already outlined. But if we elected to move to an A, which moving from C to A is a lot, it could overwhelm our system, we still have to adhere to the same transportation guidelines, so it doesn't change transportation for us. And so in looking at transportation, we're looking at the fact that we're having 1 student per seat, and that's 23 students, and no more than 2 passengers can be seated in a contracted vehicle. That's just cars and things. That's just an added, but we have paid attention to transportation. So in our planning, we took a look at, well, how many buses would be assigned to Ashley, for example? In the AM, we would need 7 buses to transport residential students. We would have 161 seats available. PM 7 buses, PM 161. AM number of cars 213, and primarily what we're saying is that if 1 student was in each car, that would be 213 cars we'd have to run through that school, and Ashley, there's no room for that. And the number of cars, if there were 2 students, will be 106, of course, half of that. So we're really looking at every single school to see, what if kids didn't ride the bus? What would the car situation look like? So it's not just about cohorting students in A and B, it's about figuring out how many cars can get in those lots. We know Meadowlark is a nightmare on a regular basis, so is Caleb's Creek and Southeast, but we're looking at the number of cars and asking principals to plan around these cars. So what happens with residential students? Residential students, we're routing for residential students. Residential students have an opportunity to register for transportation. But again, if they don't need transportation or they're not taking advantage of transportation, that opens us up for more opportunities. But we will not know that until we get those registration forms. So I just wanted to share with you that we are looking at cars and buses in one lot. School buses for transporting students in Forsyth, we have 341 buses. The number of buses needed for residential alone is 270 buses. The number of buses needed for EC are 50, but there's 320 buses. That leaves us 21 buses. Number of buses needed for elementary choice are 105, elementary magnet 32, middle and high school magnet on 115. That's with the toolkit of using 23 students to a bus. Now, if transportation shifts and we get more students on a bus and there's masking and those kinds of things, then certainly all of this becomes something different. But what I cannot stand here and say is that we have enough buses for magnet and choice. We've said that pretty much since June. We don't have enough buses for magnet and choice, and we don't have the dollars to purchase those opportunities. And so the additional buses to continue those services would be 252 buses, and you can see the cost there. And the challenge that we have is we had 55 vacancies in March, and we actually have more vacancies now. And so what would happen, even if you go back up to the residential students, the 270, we must get these students we're required to do the 270 and the 320. If we're absent a bus driver without a sub, we have to double route the kids. And since we can't just double route them like we normally would, just pick up 2 routes at a time, we have to loop back around and pick up those children. So the reality is there's just not enough buses for that. Now, if the magnet and choice students wanted to arrive at school at 10:30, yes, that would be possible. Pick them up, they could arrive about 10:30, and they could go home after the residential students, which would get them home later in the day. But we would have to work out who stays with them late, what kind of instruction would be going on. And so what we advise our magnet, and based on this, we're just saying you just can't. It would take 2 to 3 hours of time based on that. That's one of the biggest constraints we have. I also wanted to mention some comparable size districts and what they've done. Charlotte-Mecklenburg starts in 1020 with a phase-in 3 cohorts. Guilford County 1020, New Hanover County phases in 1020, and Wake County voted last night 1026. Cumberland County and Durham, the superintendent did recommend Plan B, by the way, for Cumberland. Board voted on C, and Durham, everyone recommended C. I wanted to mention some of the high school students. High school students in New Hanover starts Tuesday. Charlotte-Mecklenburg, December 14th. They're actually bringing students in for testing in December. January 20th, Wake is January. Cumberland, of course, in Durham, to be determined at the end. So that's, before I go into contact tracing, I wanted to stop and answer any questions you might have for employees or for transportation.
On the transportation, you were just talking about the students that would, have to stay later, for the other round of buses. What time would they be delivered to their homes? Are we looking at late do we have an approximate time for something like that?
So let's say that a Meadowlark Elementary got out at, 2:30, or let's say 2:30. That bus will then pick up the middle school route. Then they will come back and pick up the magnet. So it might be 6 o'clock in the afternoon before they get back, because the middle school route has to run first. And then if a bus is assigned 3 routes, when high school comes back on, it makes it even more complex, because now you're running 3 routes. You're running high school, middle, and elementary. And so it could be 6 o'clock before they got home.
Okay, thank you.
In these calculations, it was 1 child per seat, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So if we've got a bus that has 4 sets of siblings, then that adds more capacity, which we probably will have quite a bit of that, more than likely. So the other question, I guess, with that, of course, that would change maybe if you had a 4th and 5th grader and they were on cohorts, and so your days will be, your ridership will differ with the different cohorts and things like that. So, but we may have more capacity simply from families or siblings, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
We're good. All right.
Okay. Ms. Burke and Ms. Monsinger.
Okay. Board Member Burke, we were trying to get you on earlier. We apologize for whatever audio issues we're having.
Okay, are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I wanted to say thank you for the information, all of the hard work from the team for the return to school. So my first question is about transportation. Dr. Harrison, can you tell us how transportation or the lack of bus transportation will impact students whose parents may not be able to request it in time before transportation is not available? What kind of impact will that have on those students and the schools that they attend?
So the residential students were routing, even if the parent doesn't request transportation, the residential students were routing anyway. And then we are waiting to see what their preference will be and pairing that up. And so there will be some reaching out to parents to be sure, but the goal is to be sure that children have transportation if they're residential. It will impact choice and magnet, but our hope is that with parents who've emailed us, some of them want virtual. So our hope is that they will select virtual if they so desire. That will free up more opportunities for transportation for magnet and choice, and it will free up opportunities to increase the number of days students attend school. So right now, those are almost guarantees if you're residential. If you're magnet or choice, there's no guarantee at this point under this plan.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding. There's no guarantee for the students to remain with their current teachers. This could disrupt their first quarter of learning and put them in a totally new learning environment. Is that correct?
Not if they select virtual. They can remain with their current teacher if they select virtual, if they do not have transportation.
I thought virtual was different from remote. Remote is the third option, is Plan C. And then we have Virtual Academy, which is totally separate. So students who are on Plan C right now, how will that affect them if they are not able to get their choice and not able to remain in magnet due to transportation? Will they be assigned different teachers, different environment?
So these are the options, Ms. Burke. 100% virtual academy with synchronous instruction. That would be that face-to-face synchronous, and that's about 3,600 students that have registered saying, I want virtual 100%. They've been assigned to the virtual academy. The next option is in-person by cohort combined with remote learning. So if I'm at a school and we'll send the, pending you all's vote, we would send out preference forms on Monday. So if I'm at, let's say I'm at, I don't know, Petri, and I decide that I am a choice student, my 5th grade teacher, I'm still with my teacher synchronous wise. When the teacher moves back on site, if I do not have transportation, I have a remote option with that teacher. So that was a change in our process.
Okay, I just want to make sure that our students will be able to remain with their same teacher and at their same school, assigned school, no matter what.
Yes, ma'am.
My second question, again, I know that a lot of hard work has gone into this plan, and I know that you already covered the options thoroughly, and you did mention the option for teachers. Can you go back and clarify the option that you gave teachers for me?
Yes, ma'am. So the teachers, one is to go to work, to report to the school, which a lot of our teachers are reporting and staff members are reporting right now. The other option would be they would apply for leave. They could apply for leave under the extended leave process or through the Americans with Disabilities Act for accommodations. They could take extended leave. They could take family and medical leave expansion under the Expansion Act, up to 12 weeks, but that does expire December 31st.
And how many teachers have applied for any of these leave options?
So when we did the survey in July, a lot of them just filled out the forms, but official forms that have been filled out is close to 100. And those are in the process of being, they have to meet with each of those individual staff members to see if they qualify. But what has to happen, really, a lot of people are waiting to see what the vote will be before they really complete the process, because there's some documentation that teachers need to provide in order to qualify for these leave options.
Okay, and I heard you say that this is data from July. Again, have we given any consideration to providing a survey at this point in time, because our situation has changed a lot since July? Are we going to have an updated survey that our teachers can respond to so that they can let us know what their preferred options might be?
No, ma'am. Right now, I'm recommending Plan B, which means that teachers and staff would be asked to return to work. And if not, then they would meet with Human Resources and pursue the options for leave. And if they
Dr. Harrison, I just wanted to just make sure we were all aware that under the leadership of Val Young and the FCAE, there has been a survey done, and the data was
Sent to the board.
Was sent to the board.
Okay.
Yes.
So Chair Woodbury said the data was sent from their survey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But as a district, the survey that we have going out is the Fall Learning Survey, which actually is a survey to students and to teachers to ask them how we can better support whichever platform that they're on. So this will be a fall learning survey, but not a survey to ask if you'd like to come back to B, A, or C. So no, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. And this is Elizabeth. And I did want to reinforce the question from Mrs. Burke about a survey, because my understanding when we took the vote to go all to Plan C, part of that had a great deal to do with the responses we had received of the survey questions that too many of our employees would choose not to return to work, whether it was retire early, look for other work. So I think there's been an enormous amount of work in this plan, but I would caution the district to be going forward without asking that information, because I think it's important. I have a question about the expanded FMLA Act. Does that cover quarantine for somebody who is not sick but has had a positive direct exposure?
I'll defer to our attorney on that one. No.
Yes.
And while she's getting ready, Ms. Monsinger, I'd like to clarify, the survey that went out asked if teachers would like an alternative work assignment. And so on August, in August, when our HR department met with teachers, they were asked if you qualify for an alternate work assignment and you're seeking those opportunities, that's when the teachers filled out the information. And that was close to 100 students, which was nowhere like the 700 before. And I have to be totally transparent. I know FCA has a survey, and I think we should look at that data to some degree. Some of our survey data, when we sent them out to teachers, we have to be able to get them get the authentic feedback. So I think the HR has a good process of getting that authentic feedback. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I hope that is the case. I guess I'm hearing from people who are feeling differently. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping things very open and transparent in all directions.
And Ms. Monsinger, this is Dion Jenkins. I wanted to respond to your question about the expanded FMLA. So the FMLA Expansion Act, which is one of the new leaves available under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, it does not allow FMLA for exposure. That particular type of leave is exclusive for individuals who are unable to work because their child's, either their child care provider or their school is closed. And so that is limited to just that reason. However, under the Extended Sick Leave Act, there are 6 reasons for which an employee could qualify for extended sick leave up to 80 hours. And so one of those is that the employee has been advised to quarantine because of exposure to someone who's tested positive for COVID-19, or the employee is unable to work because they have to care for someone who has been exposed or who has been diagnosed with COVID-19.
Okay, my concern is my understanding is that if you have had a positive exposure as defined by the CDC, you really are supposed to quarantine for 14 days. And I want to make sure that we are prepared and our employees are protected when that happens.
Yes, so
because that will happen.
So if an employee is advised to quarantine because of exposure, they do have the option, if it's appropriate for their work, to telework during that time. So they're not required to take leave unless for some reason they're not able to telework during that time period.
So what would happen to your classroom if you're a 2nd grade teacher and you had a positive exposure that your whole classroom did not have? I mean, if you're a teacher and your whole class has to quarantine for 14 days, then I suppose it's not as big an issue.
So if we could, we have a section on contact tracing, Ms. Monsinger, if we could.
So we'll be covering that later in this presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Jones.
Thank you, Chair Woodbury. So I just had a question around the transportation. We've been asked from parents, will transportation be provided for after school care?
Yes.
Okay, because I think that they just need some clarity on that. So if they took a bus from their elementary school and were dropped off at a YMCA,
yes,
that will continue to happen.
Yes, ma'am, and that was an adjustment that Chris was able to work
Okay.
out, and I apologize for not adding that, but yes, after-school care will be added, yes.
Wonderful. And then just one other clarifying question. So I know we had the guidelines for transportation for elementary students. So the governor has only opened up Plan A for that elementary piece. But am I correct in saying that, because this took me a while to grasp, so am I correct in saying that the transportation, though, how many numbers are on a bus, that's the same for either Plan A or Plan B?
It's the same.
It's the same, okay. Because I think that it's good for our community to understand that some of those limitations are still there, and that's completely out of our control, and that's controlled by the governor. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, still the same.
Oh,
Board Member Crawley.
thank you. Okay, I have a couple questions. One, just to clarify, with the schedule that talks about when teachers are coming back into the buildings, is it fair to say a lot of teachers are already in the buildings?
Yes, they
Okay.
are.
Okay.
Well, it depends on the school now. I've gone to schools where just about the whole staff is there, and I've gone to where there are 2 or 3, so it really is.
So it varies, okay. And I've heard from some testing coordinators and high school principals that are concerned about administering the testing in January for high school students, especially given that people haven't been in the building.
Yeah, we have concerns too, but that's in North Carolina statute, so there's not really, the legislators chose not to address it. And so
Okay.
it's a requirement by law.
Okay, and then my last question is, I'm very concerned about the K-3 teachers who would be coming back to work 4 days a week who might have children in the older grades. So typically their childcare is school. So if we don't have school for those, what do we have a plan?
So we've asked our principals to come up with a central location for staff members' children. So if you have a student, we did not talk about age appropriateness, but I'll have to get back with you on that. But we did ask them to have a central location like the media center, and the teachers will work out a rotation of social distancing and watching those children who are online. And that included our bus drivers and our custodians and our cafeteria staff. So was it just exclusive to teachers? Is for employees who have children in that school who need to be out working, driving buses, cleaning, cooking, and those kinds of things.
Okay. Thank you for thinking about that.
All right. Ms. Young, do I get a prize for that? She's gone.
Dr. Harrison, Dr. Harrison, I have one quick question.
I'm sorry.
We've heard a whole lot from teachers and being in elementary ed teacher myself, manipulatives, and the room's going to look real different and all those kinds of things. And I do know we can use, beans and things like that for manipulatives, but do we have, is it up to each school to figure those things out? And will we have, do we have funds to buy certain things, like maybe little crates and boxes that each individual child keeps all their personal manipulatives or things that they need to do education?
You want to address that, Lauren?
With, I know there are ways that we can do that. It won't look the very same, but I think we can have some of those things. But
yeah, she's been doing a lot of training with Trish McManus on this. I'll ask Lauren Richards to address that.
So a lot of teachers have asked about manipulatives, and the guidance that we have been giving them is, just like you said, small containers. There are a lot of different things that are a hard surface that can be disinfected. The container can be disinfected. And so what we've advised them to do is assign a crate either by a child or by an activity, and they can rotate that item on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, or a quarterly basis, so long as they have that disinfecting process in between so they can clean all those manipulatives. Excuse me. Some teachers have elected to do a quarantine for the containers.
Mm-hmm.
So they make a set of containers, they'll sit them off to the side for 14 days, and then they have another set of containers. So we've given them some of that flexibility, but as long as they're either quarantined or they're disinfected, they would be able to kind of share those in that process.
and books, that was my other question. It's kind of my understanding I mean, I know the teacher that I volunteer with, I mean, she's got enough books that you could, like you say, you could quarantine or rotate them. And so, I mean, there was a big concern about not having been able to use any books, but do we have a process for that?
Yeah, so a lot of the guidance in CDC speaks to the cross-contamination not necessarily being on paper items, but we are asking them to be very mindful of that. Most of the guidance that we are following is kind of that quarantine process. Give it a few days to kind of sit off to the side before another child uses it. Asking the teachers to be very visual in the classrooms about the child's use of the book. We know for the younger grades, the students may tend to touch their face or other things and transfer things onto those books. And so there may be certain books that they need to assign specific to a child and keep it that way. And so we're really just trying to monitor some of that. And I know Nicolette Grant and our media coordinators are definitely looking into those methods as well.
Deanna Kaplan and I noticed on our tour of Stokes County School, they were using everything, but Marilyn, I thought of you because I saw a lot of bottles of the bleach solution that they have in preschools, and they just kept constantly spraying and wiping everything, and then they just set it over to the side. But they had manipulatives, they had art supplies. I mean, I know some people's fear was going back and Plan B was going to be very sterile and not look anything like what their kids would expect school to look like, and that just was not our experience anywhere we went. But there were definitely protocols and the supplies in place to make all that happen.
Yes,
Yeah.
we ordered spray bottles for every single classroom, for our break rooms and our front offices. So it's not just the custodial staff in the schools that you're going to see with that product. Our custodial staff, our facility specialists are working on training videos. They're actually recording them tomorrow with our media staff so that we can show them how to properly hit high-touch surfaces. What is a high-touch surface? And so teachers will have the ability in their classrooms to hit whatever surface they need to during their classroom time, and then your custodial staff will be coming in to do a more thorough spraying and hit heavier surfaces, but they're going to have what they need at any point throughout the day if they see an item that they need to kind of take out of a rotation and stop contacting.
I started to say we're having a yucky bucket, which anything that has been
a
really
great name for
touched
it.
goes in that bucket, and then at the end of the day, it's bleached and it's disinfected in a certain way and dried. So yeah.
This is Elizabeth. Is this an okay time to ask a question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My concern actually is much more about ventilation than fomites, because the science is not, it's really not objects as much as ventilation. This seems to be very airborne. And my understanding is that many of our schools have real ventilation issues. And while you can be trying, bleaching desk surfaces, if it's really airborne, I'm confused how we're addressing the major way this gets transmitted.
So the last board meeting, there was capital projects approved, and part of that was to address some of the schools that did not have good ventilation. Brent's here and Lauren's here. Did y'all want to address the ventilation, either one, how we'll deal with that? Most of our schools, there's been an assessment. They've ensured that most of our schools have ventilation, but those that didn't, we are in the process of a purchase, or we've done the purchase. If you talk about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Brent Teague, by the way, is our executive director for facilities.
Thank you. So the schools that we presented to the last meeting were underway. They're actually being installed already. They're working through the weekend. It looks like all of those schools will be taken care of before October the 19th.
And the name of the system, Brent, again?
It's bipolar ionization.
Bipolar ionization, yes.
So it basically sanitizes the air. It's just a constant sanitation. Case studies have shown in other school systems that it knocks the germ count in half. So it's a good system. The other schools that we haven't put that in yet, we've extended the run hours on the HVAC system, and we're keeping normal check on our ERVs, which bring fresh air into the building, and our air filters as well.
Thank you, Brent. So contact tracing is a very important aspect of what we do. We've learned that throughout this process of growing and learning, and we will follow the guidelines from the health department relative to contact tracing. And I did want you to know that they work with us currently on contact tracing. Close contact is defined as being physically exposed within 6 feet of another person for 15 minutes or more with or without a face covering. And so if a student or employee has been determined to have been in close contact with someone diagnosed with COVID, and we have that already, we do contact tracing, we have that every day happen. They must remain out of school or work for 14 days. If the person is not positive with symptoms, they can telework and continue working. The students would more than likely be one of two things. They would remain home for that period of time and go back to synchronous learning, or we would assign someone, a substitute, to be in the classroom while the students went on virtual and continued the work. But we don't intend, if the teacher is ill and has symptoms, we certainly don't expect them to telework or teach. We would have substitutes or long-term substitutes paid for that. And HR is in the process of training, or they have trained those long-term substitutes. So there is a toolkit that provides us also the guidelines for school buses. We must clean school buses, high-touch surfaces. We have sprayers that we are using which monitor students, and we will be bringing on people to help with collecting the attestation forms for the bus drivers as they focus on driving the bus. This is pretty much a repeat here of, the things that we must do here for transportation. So I'll go here, contact tracing in schools. So in elementary schools, it's important that we cohort students. If we have 15 students to a teacher, it's very important that we be able to have those students with that teacher as much as possible. And anytime we can, have teachers rotate to the students so that we can focus on where the students have been and who they've, the contacts that they have made. And we realize that as we go through this process, more than likely we're going to have positive cases, more than likely we're going to have some exposure. And that does not mean the person is positive. We're careful with masking and social distancing. It is really a situation where the person is going to be fine. In middle school, we are working, the challenge we have in middle school that we're working with principals on are the encore classes, the band, the chorus, the music, and how they separate students. So they're working on a plan so that students can remain in their cohort while they're at schools. High schools are the most difficult, and I do want to bring that to everyone's attention. And while I know our high school students want to be in school several days, the more students you have in school over several days, the more likely you will have to close the entire school when there is some kind of positive testing. What do I mean? Students who report to math class, they don't go to teacher B for English class. They don't go to CTE as a cohort. They continue to mix. So all of these students start out in math class are marked by X. They may go to English class, some of them may go to English class. The infected student might go from math to English. But now you're mixed with two other groups of students identified by Z. You change classes again. That Y student who's infected now is infecting or with a class of students who with X, Z, and another group of students who might be A. That same student may go to physical science, and now they're with only two of the students they started out with are they in class with. They're with one of the A students from a previous class and a whole nother group of B students. And so one infected student at the high school could potentially infect many, many more students. And we realize that they're the most difficult students to get to wear masks. They're very social. They want to hug and, all that. But we're going to have to really work with our high schoolers in December before they come back on expectations. Because what we have seen happen in high schools is one student, when they go through all of these classes, they touch so many other students, the whole cohort for the day has to close. You just cannot control who they've had access to. So the older the students are and the more diverse the schedule, the more likely we are to have to close schools. And I would like to let you know that our agreement with Joshua was to work together. School districts always work with the health department on whether to close schools, whether it's TB or some other whooping cough. Anytime there's an infectious disease in a school, whether it's the flu, when we had H1N1, we worked with our health departments to determine to close schools. And so that's fluid depending on how many students we have to contact trace. And I will say that exposure to positive cases are reported online to school nurses, and we do a very good job working with our Jennifer Corso will be our new director of nurses, but she's with the health department. So there's been it'll be a seamless transition. October 5th just means she comes over to us on payroll and full time, but she's been with us for some time. So she knows our district, she knows our process. We will also be hiring through our CARES dollars 2 full-time contact tracers. This is a very big job just where we are now, and we will need to have that support. And then in addition, the nurses that we're bringing on board. And so contact tracing is it's a confidential process, but at the same time, I want to make it clear that the process is made easier when students who are in cohorts remain together. And I did want to remind again, while our Director of Nursing starts October 5th, she's been with us the whole time. We'll have contact tracing staff. There'll be some training done through Johns Hopkins. In fact, our board attorney went through the training. It was 6 hours, I believe, she went through the training just to get a feel for it. And we will also have a dashboard. This dashboard was created by Brent Campbell's team. Evan created this, and it's sort of like the one from Rock Hill, South Carolina. It's one of the better ones we found. So this would be updated every day so that people could see in a transparent way how we are doing with quarantine, staff who've been quarantined, students who tested positive, and staff who tested positive. So this will be published on our website and maintained. We also have a Bully Patrol hotline. And that hotline we have converted to a COVID safety risk tip line in case employees want to report any violations of masking, social distancing, not following our expectations. They can call this hotline, don't have to identify themselves, and we will follow up on those reports. Yeah, did I hear Ms. Montsinger? I think so. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I did have a question about 2 things. Career Center, what is the plan for Career Center and those students? And number 2 is in the elementary schools, the people who teach specials, are they going to go from class to class, and what are we doing to protect them?
So each school has a plan that they are putting. Some principals have already worked out a rotation wherein the specials rotate through periodically. We do not intend to cross cohort students to go to specials. So they'll remain together, and they will have the same PPE as a classroom teacher.
So that is meant to kind of protect the cohort of students, but what about the employee who is being exposed to perhaps a whole school?
Well, an employee will go to a classroom and socially distance and be required to wear a mask. We will actually help them with face shields if they so desire. So they will have the same protection as the classroom teacher, staying away from the students, socially distancing, requires students to wear masks. And one of the things we probably haven't talked about is the risk if students have masks, teachers have masks, and you socially distance, now we know teachers are going to get close to students, but they require masks and face shields, then we certainly feel they will be safe. So they will follow the same precautions as all teachers.
Dr. Harrison, I will say that teaching at the university level at one of our NC system schools at North Carolina NT State University. As a teacher, my new normal is I carry around my personal kit and I spray all the stuff down. I'm very personalized as a teacher now around my safety. And it's just a new way of doing things, but the students respect that even if they have to use my stuff to present, I'm wiping it down before and after, and everybody is just now kind of accustomed to the new normal, and it's all for us. It's humbling. It's a teaching moment, but you know, we are trying to provide an essential service in order to, you know, sustain our community. So I hope that this district can encourage teachers to have their own agency around protecting themselves in this time. And lastly, I just want to make make a observation around the high school schedule. I would ask the district to look at the ninth graders from the standpoint they're probably the most vulnerable as high school students and at risk, and they probably have the most coordinated schedule out of all the students. So pretty much most of the ninth graders will have a ninth grade math class, science class, so except those that maybe have been, you know, on a more advanced track from middle school. But I think the majority of the ninth grade group there may be some options for any
Staying
district.
together, the cohorts.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good point.
Yes.
I did want to finish Ms. Montsinger's question, if that's
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
With the Career Center, Ms. Montsinger, we had talked about them remaining virtual because you have students coming from all over the county, but I was mentioning Board Member Crowley had an idea that we're going to explore in one of her conversations was looking at the Career Center students. If they elect to go there, that would be their place, their location, and they would remote out to their schools. So if a student from West wanted to spend 3 periods a day at the Career Center and then go virtual for their West Forsyth classes or Carver or any of the schools, we would allow that. But we've got to get together and work that out with the Career Center teachers and then the principals at the high school. But that was a suggestion.
Board Member Burke, and then we'll get you, Board Member.
Thank you so much. I have so many questions, and I really mean so many questions, and I'm just going to start with a really basic one. Who will be responsible for the cleaning of the classroom bathrooms in between use for the elementary kids?
You want to answer that?
So first and foremost, we're asking teachers to be mindful of monitoring the bathroom use for those younger grades that are in there, doing education with the students about hand hygiene and bathroom etiquette when they're using those spaces. We will be asking the teachers to hit some high-touch surfaces, such as the handles of a faucet. But if the teacher notices that there's something more extreme in that bathroom in the classroom that needs to be taken care of, they would be able to phone out and get support from their custodial staff.
Okay, I really, let me ask, what happened when it is lunchtime and all masks come off? How do we control droplets at that time?
Let me take that. So whenever we're eating, it's really important that we would maintain our social distancing. Students will most likely be going down to the cafeteria so that they have a few moments to kind of move their legs, maybe go to the bathroom, have some controlled movement within the school. They would get their food, they would come back to the classroom, they'd be masked that entire time. And then again, education from the teachers, communicating with the students that they remove their mask, set it off to the side, eat their meal, stay at their space, possibly work on something independent if they choose to do that, but it may be some free time. And then is monitoring those students so that as soon as they finish eating their meal, they're able to complete hand hygiene and replace that mask. So it will need to be controlled, but during that time period, masks will be off.
So teachers will have a lot on them. Let me ask this question. The schools that have poor ventilation, I think we identified 11 schools. Are we really prepared to send our employees and our students back in those buildings at this time? And if we do, what do we know already will be the direct impact on their health?
So we had Brent, he explained how we were gonna handle the air quality in there, and what I can do is have him send that out to the full board. He can send that document to the full board on how we'll handle the air quality in those 11 schools.
I'm certain that parents, concerned parents who have students at these 11 schools would love to hear that before we vote tonight to put their kids back in a building that we have already identified with poor ventilation systems.
Well, would you like him to, he presented it, would you like him to come back and talk about that some more, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Before we vote on a plan to.
I think that if the issue is parents want to know, they have heard. I think maybe Board Member Burke, with all due respect, I think there's some technical issues maybe on our side with your device, and I think that's why you may be in and out of some of the conversation. I would ask that if it's you that have not heard, that the superintendent definitely accommodate you and the rest of the board, but our staff member did present literally 10-15 minutes ago around this issue with ventilation for the public.
Excuse me, Chair Woodbury, I
Yes.
did hear that.
Okay.
And I have received some emails since then, and so the response from, as far as parents are concerned, who have emailed me, that response is not satisfactory.
Okay, well,
And
that's
so
a different issue, yeah.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah, I'm in, I haven't missed anything.
Okay, we just wanted to make sure.
I wanted to go back to the question I had regarding the survey. Dr. Harrison, you did say that you had received a survey from FCAE, and you also referenced the survey that you all did in July for Forsyth County, and you said only about 100 employees indicated that they wanted another option. Well, over the last weeks, over the last month, I know we have received hundreds of emails, not 100, but hundreds of emails from fearful employees begging us to have empathy for them and give them some consideration. So again, I'd like to see the survey from FCAE, and I would like to see us survey our staff and really ask them only 2 questions. Option C, remain on remote learning, or option B, return face-to-face. Is that possible?
So, Ms. Burke, you received you have it in your email, the FCAE survey. If you don't have it, we'll forward it to you. But the board members received the survey. And if the board elects to have a survey, that is not my recommendation. We're here to serve the public. We're here to serve children. If you would like to, as a board, have a survey, then a vote from the board would certainly get that done. Again, not my recommendation, but I am an employee of the board, so whatever you all decide. Okay?
Thank you so much. So again, I want to make sure I'm understanding. It is up to this board to make a decision whether or not they want to hear from the employees. We can make that decision.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now let me go back to the 11 schools. I was interim. I heard everything. Can you please list those 11 schools or put them up on the screen?
Well, the 11 schools are enclosed in the document you all received last month with the capital project. I can have Brent Teague send that to you. If that he can email that to you, or I can have Lisa email that to you all.
Do we have anyone who can name those schools during this meeting?
I don't think so, ma'am. I think we could probably get the document and email it to you.
And we can put it up on the website or whatever for it.
It's posted.
Yeah, it's posted from last meeting.
From the
Yeah,
last
exactly.
meeting. It's posted.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
posted.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I think you all
We
talked.
have one question from Board Member Parker,
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, over with the new governors, saying that it was more minimal in elementary schools, does that eliminate the overflow rooms we heard about initially?
So no, ma'am, you mean the, oh, yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Okay,
yes, it does.
because we had a lot of questions about the overflow
Yes,
rooms.
yes.
And also there was we got some emails that talked about how children were still gonna come to school, but they were just gonna sit there on a computer in one class and not change classes. Is that, I don't see that in this plan,
That's
that
not
is
been in our plan.
not
Mm-mm.
true, correct, okay.
That's not been in our plan.
Leave
Now,
it.
some of the high school principals talked about that as a way to cohort high school students, but that's not been in our plan.
Okay, these were mainly, I think, middle schoolers that had this question. Okay, I just wanted to clear that up, so.
Okay.
Board Member Crawley.
Thank you. I am concerned about our K through 3 teachers teaching live and virtual simultaneously. And I know some of them have teachers' assistants. Would there be a way to help, you know, what can we do to get them help so they can watch the kids that are in seats in front of them and also the faces on the screen and they're minding the bathroom?
That's a principal decision.
Okay.
Some schools have varying levels of staff, and so you have some schools with an abundance of staff because they have a lot of maybe EC programs or different programs, and so it's in the principal's plan.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And I do want to make a comment that, you know, the districts that we've talked to and teachers we've talked to in other districts, the most stressful thing has been teaching children in front of them and then having to either get off of their go handle students at home with packets and creating packets and things. So I think the system we have in place is going to really help them, but it's learning new technology. So yes, ma'am. But that'll be in the principal plan. So you all talked about reopening metrics, and the only thing I wanted to bring to your attention here is that, you know, our reliance on metrics, it changes every day, and we certainly don't want to do anything unsafe. But this was a slide that was presented earlier. And I will have to say the health department was trying to get their metrics done for Monday because we wanted to send the board some data. So that was probably why it stopped Saturday and didn't go any further. But these are just some thoughts around our ideas internally of when we start to really look at metrics, when we start to look at when we bring children back. If we get to January, we certainly want to look at the numbers. And so my request is that we continue with the COVID subcommittee so we can quickly convene board members and talk about transition if that should be a challenge for us. So implementing our plan, we feel that we have a safe return plan. We feel that our facilities are ready. We feel that the budgetary needs that we had, the challenges we had before have been met. We realize that transportation is for children who live in the attendance zone and for children who are EC. If we have extra buses and we are able to provide Magda and Choice down the road, we want to be able to do that, but we cannot overcommit in that area because we just don't have the buses or the drivers. And we feel that community spread is at a good time for us to move forward based on what we heard from our health department. So when we move forward and we're looking at what happens, we know that our bus drivers will be masked, and here are some samples of where kids will know where to sit. And our goal is to add additional staff, 300 staff members that we want to add in the morning to help with the attestation form and help our bus drivers. We realize that we want children, their temperatures taken, and we want some screening processes, and we're working with our screening process. They had a training this past Wednesday, and they're setting up their screening teams. We know that you've seen this plexiglass that's here, you've seen it as you've gone in schools, and you've seen this temperature gauge here. So in the mornings, just for me, what I do is I take out my cell phone, I punch an app, I answer all the screening questions, I go in, I take my temperature on that device there, and in like 10 seconds, I've submitted it, I've gotten a high five or a downy, frowny face or down, and then that goes into a database which we look at. So it's a very easy process for adults the way Lauren has set up the app. You've seen these plexiglass panels, again, special education. The special education, $500,000 is dedicated. They've got enough PPE, gowns, shields, and masks for 3 months, and we continue to wait on some of the plexiglass that we feel will be needed for students who cannot mask. And Lauren, I mentioned that some of our PPE we cannot receive until we vote or until there is a transition to B. Would you explain what PPE that is involved?
So back over the summer, the governor initiated PPE that was sent out to all of the school districts. That included face masks, 5 for every staff member and every child. Those have been received. Those have been sent out to the schools for the students. We just surveyed staff last week to get those numbers by buildings and by departments, and they start going out next week. But the additional PPE that Dr. Harrison is speaking on is not initiated until a school district votes for Plan B. Once the vote from the board is for Plan B, then we will coordinate with our nurse team down at the health department, and they will notify the governor's office and work with the Department of Emergency Management, and then that new shipment will be released, and I believe it is an additional 3-month supply.
So this is the signage. Our team, our communications team, along with Lauren, Daryl, and Brent have worked diligently on our signage throughout the district and getting that posted, and Jonathan has been a wonderful help helping identify areas and checking schools. So you'll see lots of signage. This is an isolation room, and so an isolation room is simply if a child is ill, the nurses that we bring on board will coordinate the coverage for the isolation room until someone picks up the child. If the child's not picked up in a due diligent time, we'll call social services and work with them on getting the child transported to their home. Students will come to the cafeteria, they will pick up their meals, go to their classrooms, they eat in their classrooms, and be 6 feet apart. And you'll see that we've got markers all throughout the school to help children, remind children of social distancing and how to stay apart in this process. There are hand sanitizer stands all throughout the district. There's one out here, and this helps us be mindful of using our sanitizer and helps it be accessible without us touching that area. This would be a classroom, and we did ask our schools to set up their classrooms so that they would have the appropriate number of students in it, so when we walk by, it's there. And so some schools elected to handle it this way. Some elected to put signs saying do not sit here so they could alternate. That was a school choice on how they set up their classrooms. We have names on seats so that we can easily contact trace. If Kyra is ill, then we know who Kyra was sitting, so there will be assigned seating throughout the district. And of course, our playground use will certainly be in place, and we have ordered sprayers, and hopefully they'll be there by the 19th. And so children, this is Chris still demonstrating. So we feel that we are ready for a safe return. We feel that we are ready to start Monday with our children, and we are ready to move forward in working through this next phase of COVID. So thank you for this opportunity to present.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Is there a motion?
No, excuse me. So,
Did you have
another question about the classrooms.
Okay. Dr. Harrison is going to her seat right now, so you give her a minute, but you can go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, Board Member Motsinger. She's at her seat now.
Okay. A couple questions. One is, how many students can we fit into a classroom? And is that the number of students who are assigned? So, for example, I'm hearing that maybe in elementary classroom you can fit in 15 students. But most of our teachers have more than 15 students. What will happen to the other students?
So with the class size reduction, we do meet those requirements. And then the only challenge we have is, of course, with inclusion and dual language immersion. And principals are asked to use second teachers and paraprofessionals to work out separating students and offering them other opportunities. But we check with our elementary principals. In fact, if you remember, we had pre-K through second grade 4 days a week, and 3, 4, and 5 2 days a week. We talked with our elementary principals, and they said, no, we can handle our students. And so we have asked them to be sure that they are 6 feet apart. And then, of course, if they're using tables, then they separate their students. And the audits will tell us whether or not they can accommodate the students. So at this point, we have no doubt that principals have worked it out. And the one thing, having been an elementary, middle, and high school principal, I realize I love our elementary teachers, but they have probably a half a room full of just stuff. And moving that out, I think, has been shocking for board members and for who went to visit some schools, and for us. And so I think that they feel pretty good. We talked to our elementary principals, and they feel pretty good. So you're welcome to drop by some schools and just check it out.
Okay. I'm hearing some teachers who are really concerned that don't feel that there's going to be room for their whole classroom to be in their whole class to be in the room. I do have another question about ventilation. So we have those 11 schools we were particularly worried about. What is the quality of ventilation in the pods or mobiles?
Brent, do you want to address that? I think they mostly have windows that can be opened, but he'll address that. And I want to say that I want to remind everyone, principals have done a great job putting together planning teams. So if teachers or anyone, if you have problems or concerns, the best place to go is to that planning team and let them help develop a plan. And then on Wednesdays, if a principal cannot work through a challenge, that's a time when the district level staff will get involved. In fact, we have a team going out to a school I think it's Monday, to help the principal work through some challenges. So there is a process in place for teachers and employees to go to their leaders and talk about their classroom and how we can support. But Brent's here to talk about the pods. I'm sorry.
So, my biggest concern about that, honestly, Dr. Hairston, is that I'm hearing from dozens, if not hundreds, of teachers who are feeling that answer is not actually addressing the concerns they have. Okay. Well, and I don't know what I should be saying to them.
I would say that they need to go to the planning team at their school.
And so if they have, and they're still not getting adequate answers, then what?
So they have area superintendents, and the area superintendents are listed on our website, and they should contact the area superintendent, who will facilitate their concerns being addressed.
Okay, for all the teachers, please take note of that.
Yeah. Brent wanted to address the pods.
So the air systems in the pods and mobiles are barred units. They bring in fresh air when the unit is running, so they get the air turnover that's necessary in those rooms. That'll probably be the list on our second wave of this bipolar ionization. We'll include those as we're hitting these schools. If there's any mobiles or modulars there, we're installing those devices in those units.
I think Board Member Burke, is your hand up, or is that from another time you were asking a question?
Yeah, my hand is up. Thank
Yes,
you
ma'am.
so much. I want to come back in behind Elizabeth with the same question about ventilation. We have a duty and an obligation to this community to answer that question. And if the answer is simply located on the website, it seems that someone at the education building right now could pull it up, go to the mic, and name those 11 schools. We are receiving text messages and emails from individuals asking us to name those 11 schools, and we have a duty and an obligation to do so.
Well, Ms. Parker pulled it up on her phone.
Just read it from your phone.
We'll get Brent we'll ask Ms. Parker to read it. She just pulled it up.
And this was just sent to me, so. Cook, Southwest, is this right? West? Okay. North Hills, Kimberly Park, Griffith, Hall Woodward, Cache, Petrie, Bolton, Mineral Springs, and Sedge Garden. All right?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you read them one more
Yes, ma'am.
time, but a little
Certainly.
slower,
Cook.
Board Member Parker?
Cook, Southwest,
Yes,
North Hills,
yes,
Kimberly Park,
yes.
Griffith, Hall Woodward, Cache, Petrie, Bolton, Mineral Springs, and Sedge Garden.
Thank you so much, Board Member Parker. This is a very serious situation that we're discussing tonight, and we need to take in consideration that people have different feelings regarding this conversation, and we need to have empathy for everyone. So let me start with a question. Who will be responsible for watching the children of employees when they have to work but are not able to provide child care and have to bring their children to work with them?
And that's going to be each principal's responsibility. Some will have their teachers rotate on their planning who have children there. Some will use the media specialist. That's up to each principal to work out, but that's the expectation.
Okay, and I think that before we move further, we need to have some clear answers for these teachers, clear answers for these families, because they have to make some tough decisions, and they are looking to us to have a plan that we have really spent a lot of time on, making sure that all bases are covered and so that they feel comfortable. And just to say it's going to be up to the principals, that really makes us feel like we're not ready. Who will man the isolation rooms?
That'll be covered by the nurses that we're hiring or that are on board.
So it will not be covered by any employees, no teachers, no teacher assistants, no administrators,
There
only by nurses.
There are some backup individuals that are trained, and I think they're earning a supplement to be a backup, but that'll be managed by the nurses. If 16 nurses run out of opportunities, then we'll have a backup at those schools. Yes, ma'am.
Were these individuals voluntold or did they volunteer?
Well, we offered a $2,000 site stipend, and so they volunteered to get that stipend.
Okay. I wanted to also talk about reality. You know, again, we must have empathy for everyone, and we must understand that we're not running a company where we work with products or that's run by robots. This is a system with human beings, run by human beings and not run by robots. And as a former elementary school teacher right here in this district, I can tell you, we have not even talked about the realities of what will happen day to day. We have not talked about kids who will have masks all over the floor, kids who will sneeze, who will cough, whose noses will run all day, and who, believe it or not, these babies will wipe their noses with their hands, some of them, and then they will touch everything and they will touch everybody and they will expect hugs. And some of them may even become sick. We are not able to manage all of that. Not one teacher and not a teacher and not a teacher's assistant. We are asking for some impossible things to occur from teachers. They are not robots and our children are not robots. And we have not had realistic conversations. Somebody said that it's going to be more difficult to keep the students, high school students, in their best than elementary students. Well, guess what? I spent a bunch of years on the high school level also. You're going to have problems with masks no matter what level it is, and we do need to have some realistic conversations, and those conversations need to involve those front line workers, those teachers assistants, those people who come into contact with kids every single day. We're making decisions, and the people who are making decisions are way out of touch with what goes on in a building every day. Thank you.
Thank you. There a motion?
Yes, ma'am, I would like to move that we adopt Plan B. And I would also like to make an amendment to that with some metrics. Did I do that now, or do we go ahead with the motion and then do that?
Dion, can,
Excuse me, I would like to make a substitute motion. I would like to make a substitute motion that we table Plan B tonight until we get a lot of questions answered for our community, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. And until then, I think that we should table Plan B tonight.
is there a second for the substitute motion?
I would second the substitute motion.
Okay, any?
This is Elizabeth.
Okay, any question or discussion on the substitute motion?
Yes, this is Elizabeth, and I would just like to make a comment. And my comment is that there are a lot of moving parts to this, including that some of the changes were really just sent to board members at 2:37 this afternoon, which makes me feel that we have not had an appropriate time to review this. We have not surveyed our staff, and therefore I think we should be surveying our staff. I think we should be doing really due diligence with this. And that is why I support this substitute motion. Thank you.
May I respond? I feel
Yes.
like I need to respond to that. You know, this document is similar to what we had, that the changes were sent yesterday to board members, and the presentation was sent to board members. What was added was the data slides and some of the edits that were made, and there was one made to Mount Tabor. And so those were the changes, and they were highlighted in the email. So that went out today. So I just wanted to let you know there were no significant changes in the plan between yesterday and today.
And this is Board Member Byrd. I want to add to my substitute motion. I want to be really, really clear.
You've already have the so you can, we're in discussion right now, so you can have discussion, but we already have, you've motioned your secondary, your motion, you've already made the motion as a substitute, somebody seconded, so now we're in discussion and question, so you can make
So
discussion.
I'm adding to the discussion?
Yes.
I'm adding to the discussion?
Yes.
Okay. So the thing that I want to add to the discussion is, we all, I believe every board member wants nothing more than for our students to return to school. We know that that would be best. At this time, we are not clear, we are not sure that it is the safest thing to do. And one thing that I know for sure is of paramount importance at this time is empathy. This is a time that it may be uncomfortable for all of us, but we must have empathy for everyone who will be impacted by this decision, not just empathy for our own personal situations, but for the situations of all. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Wait, I think you should do a roll call.
Okay, yeah, because I forget you all, sorry.
Okay.
Can we I think there was some confusion, so Chair Woodbury, can you clarify what's on the table?
What's on the table right now is a motion by Board Member Parker to accept Plan B with matrix.
Ms. Burke.
Yeah, I know, I was just going through what happened. Yeah, so I'm just recapping what happened. And so, after Board Member Parker made the original motion, Board Member Burke made a substitute motion, and then Board Member Motzinger seconded the substitute motion to table this issue. And so we have come out of the discussion to table the issue, and now we are asking board members, all who are in favor, to table whether to go into Plan B. And so Dr. Harrison is going to take the roll call.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Chair Woodbury.
No.
Lyda Calvert-Hayes. No. Andrea Bramer.
Yes.
Barbara Burke.
Yes.
Okay, Leah Crowley,
No.
Dana Jones.
No.
Deanna Kaplan,
No.
Elizabeth Monsinger,
Yes.
Marilyn Parker.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay. So now we'll go back. Now we'll go back to the original motion.
Dion, do I do the amendment? Do I do the amendment now? Okay. So I would like to put some metrics into the motion. So, in reopening schools based on the Forsyth County, North Carolina COVID 2-day rolling average, percent positive, the linear graph that we received, we would open classrooms when the percentage of positives is below 5% on a, I could probably go either way on this 10-day or 14-day. We can have some discussion on that if you'd like, ladies. But on a count, a certain number of count days. Jude, I need me to put a count in there. Okay, let's do 10. Is that clear? Do you have any other questions about that?
So just to vote, because I was typing it up, just to make sure it's clear, your motion is to move to Plan B when there is a percentage of positives that's below 5% on a 10-day rolling period.
Right, and that's for Forsyth County.
For Forsyth County.
That's the graph I think that we were sent from the health department that you sent us a couple of days ago. The Forsyth County graph.
It's usually at five or below.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
It would be 5 or below.
5
yes.
or below.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, any question or discussion?
Yes, Elizabeth, and I just would like to say that everybody in our community, teachers most of all, want to open schools, care desperately about the well-being of children. Everybody is suffering under COVID, but it is the nature of the virus itself and our national response that has put us in such a difficult position. I want to make it very clear that voting against this is not voting against wanting children in schools. I want children in schools, and I don't know a teacher who doesn't. I just don't believe it's safe yet.
Thank you. Is there any other question or discussion before I end the vote?
I'll just say the reason I think for the metrics, we've been asked quite a bit for metrics. And I think that gives us something to monitor where we are in Forsyth County. Also, and Dr. Harrison, I think, alluded to this earlier, that we would continue to have the COVID committee, so that we would continue that committee. If as chair, we would continue to look at those numbers, and if at any time we became uncomfortable with those, then we could have some discussion around that at any point, I think.
Yes. I would just like to say that the reason why I support Plan B in a phased approach led by metrics is one, because, you know, as a board member just doing my diligent research, just like most of you in the community, I think today or yesterday I sent Dr. Harrison an article from the Academy of the National Academy of Sciences of United States of America. It was entitled "The Pandemic Influenza: Studying the Lessons of History," and I have sent her, and just like Board Member Bramer and so many of us as board members, doing research so that we're being guided by an academic perspective. And I do think that current news events are, relevant, but I try to definitely, respond to and pass on to other board members from academic publications. what have influenced my decision is around board engagement, locally and from a state perspective. So talking to Kim Irby in Guilford County Schools, or talking to Keith Sutton in Wake County, who is the board chair, to Minnie Fort Brown in Durham, who you know, it did not pass, and also talking to Carrie Sutton in Cumberland County, who I work with on the North Carolina Caucus of Black School Board Members, where it did not pass, and she had a heart-to-heart with me about why she chose to stay in Plan C. So connecting, at the level of where I am as a board member, and then also having conversations not just with Dr. Harrison, but Dr. Sharon Contreras from Guilford County Schools, Dr. Jackson from Vance County, who is the North Carolina Superintendent of the Year, and Dr. Connolly from Cumberland, who we know recommended B, but of course his board decided to go to C. What also has influenced my decision is about community conversations and engagement. I have, of course, spoken to the organizations that are in my community, District 1, whether it is with Action for Equity, Ministers Conference with Pastor Timberlake, Tambila Covington, the Urban League with James Perry, the NAACP members, parents, and definitely teachers that have encouraged me to be reminded as a civics teacher to be empowered by the trustee model. What does that mean? That I have been elected to represent the people based on being diligent in how I make decisions, based on reason and facts and information that sometimes the public do not have at their disposal to make these decisions. Lastly, I have been influenced by the science and the medical health community. First and foremost, I would like to thank board member Elizabeth Motsinger, who kind of serves as our own board medical expert as a PA. And as you can see, she has the hard questions. She challenges us. We debate with her around what she knows as an expert in the medical field and what we may not know. We have been influenced by the Duke medical team that has enabled us to continue to make good decisions. Also, the team in Wake County that is influencing our direction across the state. Lastly, we have worked with Dr. Pam Oliver, who is the Vice President of Novant Health, and I do want to specifically recognize Dr. Ohl and the Forsyth County Health Department, also influencing our decision. But I do want to recognize Dr. Pam Oliver of Novant Health, whom have at every turn been at most of the events or the forums that's influencing a lot of the school districts in the state. She has presented before the Urban School District Task Force, which makes up the largest school districts in North Carolina. She presented today at the North Carolina Caucus of Black School Board Members Fall Retreat. She has organized COVID testing in East Winston-Salem. She has been essential to the collaboration with, of course, the County Health Department, and recently she has tasked her team to work with Norwood Baptist Church and the Ministers Conference for a November the 10th Faith in the City series to talk about how do we keep our children safe in school and in our community. And although I'm very super mindful around HIPAA, I will expose this. She operated on me for 13 hours and saved my life, so I trust her. And she sent me an article from the New England Journal of Medicine, and I want to just read a brief quote from it. It's entitled, Reopening Primary Schools During the Pandemic. It reads, it is a tragic that the United States has chosen a path necessitating a trade-off between risk to educators and harm to students, giving other countries success in reducing transmission and opening schools with routine control measures in place. This dilemma represents a social and policy failure, not a medical or scientific necessity. Nonetheless, we would argue that primary schools are essential, more like grocery stores, doctor's offices, and food manufacturers than like retail establishments, movie theaters, and bars. Like all essential workers, teachers and other school personnel deserve substantial protection as well as a hazard pay. Remote working accommodations should be made, if possible, for staff who are 60 or have underlying health conditions. Adults who work in school buildings or drive school buses should be provided with PPE, and both students and staff should participate in routine pool testing. So I lay before you as a board member the reasons why I support Plan B, and I will ask for all in favor. Raise your hand.
I have a question.
Yes.
Question, please.
Chair Woodbury, can Attorney Jenkins read that second motion, because I don't think she included the metrics.
Exactly. I want to hear the entire motion with both metrics.
Dion, could you call back the motion so they're clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So the motion that was made was to move to Plan B once the percentage of positives is at 5% or below, based on a 10-day rolling count in Forsyth County. Is that correct, Ms. Parker?
Yeah, the graph that I think is the best one to use would be the Forsyth County, North Carolina COVID 2-day rolling average graph that they presented. So.
Okay. So based on that graphic for the 2-day rolling graph.
Mm-hmm.
So
percent
it's
positive
one,
linear.
It's
linear
one of
graph.
the metrics, not both, that were presented.
Yes, it appears as though there's one of the metrics, the percent positives.
Right, for starting school. Now, you would look at the other graphs ongoing to monitor where we are.
If we don't have that in the motion, then we can't make it ongoing.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think that would be what the COVID committee, and in my, what I think is that's something that the COVID committee, when we convene to continue to monitor this, would look at, and that would be up to that committee to look at that, to monitor that, and then to bring, anything out of that committee to the full board.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Parker. I think we should vote Chair Woodbury on the motion before us.
Yes. Could you call the roll, Dr. Harrison?
Certainly.
So
Chair
are you
Woodbury?
reading your amendment to the motion?
We did. I'm sorry, Board Member Burke. Are you asking for clarity on Board Member Parker's motion?
Did Board Member Parker say that she is removing her amendment to the motion?
No. They just clarified it.
Okay, Chair Woodbury?
Yes.
Lyda Calvert-Hayes?
Yes.
Andrea Bramer?
No.
Barbara Burke?
No.
Leah Crowley?
Yes.
Dana Jones?
Yes.
Deanna Kaplan?
Yes.
Elizabeth Motzinger?
No.
Marilyn Parker?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening and also convening online and being patient as we move through this process. I hope everyone have a safe night. I ask that we leave the building in a safe way. Please do not have conversations as we just go to your car and leave out so that we can maintain safety here. I ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, if there are no further questions or discussion, Dr. Harrison, if you can take a consensus. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Your School Channel, Cable 2.